The grand palaces of the world gleam with opulence, chandeliers that never dim, corridors that stretch endlessly, and portraits that seem to breathe as you pass. These walls once echoed with the voices of kings, queens, and courtiers, but if you listen closely, beneath the hum of history, there is another sound, a whisper, faint, persistent, a murmur that belongs not to the living, but to those who never left. Welcome, dear listener, to the first night of our journey into haunted royal palaces, real ghost accounts. Tonight, we begin not with a single ghost story, but with the truth behind why these places of power become prisons for the dead. Every palace is a theater of ambition, betrayal, and blood. And where history refuses to rest, the air itself remembers. If you love stories where the past still breathes, where footsteps echo long after death, then settle in. And if you haven't already, subscribe. You'll want to keep the lights on for what comes next. When you imagine a royal palace, you picture majesty, the glimmer of gold leaf, the scent of polished wood, the soft rhythm of silk shoes crossing marble. But beneath that luxury, there is rot. For every crown placed upon a head, another was taken, sometimes by deceit, sometimes by murder. And when power is stolen, it leaves scars not on the flesh, but on the very stones. Ghosts, after all, are rarely born from peace. They are born from unfinished stories. The first whisper begins in the night after coronation, a hollow silence in a chamber where a rival once slept. It may be a gust of wind or the creak of an old beam, but soon the servants start to talk. "Did you hear it?" they whisper. "She was crying again." That's how every haunting begins, not with the ghost, but with the fear of memory returning. The historian might dismiss it as superstition. The skeptic will say, "Palaces are old, they creak." But history is not only written in ink, it is soaked into the floorboards. When Catherine Howard screamed down the haunted gallery of Hampton Court, she carved a sound into the air that the centuries could not erase. When the guards at Versailles heard footsteps in empty halls, they didn't hear ghosts, they heard guilt. Because power, once corrupted, refuses to be buried. Every empire leaves behind its hauntings. The Romans had their shades, the Egyptians their curses, the Chinese emperors their restless concubines. A ghost is simply history refusing to fade, a rebellion against oblivion. And the royal dead? They have more reasons than most to linger. Imagine the long corridors of the Tower of London on a misted night. The air is heavy with rain and whispers. The torchlight flickers. A sentry swears he hears a child's laughter echoing from a locked cell, a laugh belonging to a prince who was murdered 500 years ago. He drops his pike, stumbles, but when he turns, there is only the cold. Later, he will be found trembling, whispering, "I saw them. The little princes, they were still there." The tower does not forgive forgetfulness, and neither does history. Now, cross the channel to the Palace of Versailles. The mirrors gleam with candlelight, reflecting hundreds of faces, except one. Tourists walk through the Hall of Mirrors each day, snapping photos, unaware that one mirror refuses to reflect properly. Locals say it's because, during the Revolution, blood splattered across its silver backing, and when the lights dim at dusk, some claim to see a woman in powdered hair and blue silk standing alone, her expression frozen in disbelief. They are coming. The mob is coming. Marie Antoinette, they say, never left her palace. Why do the ghosts of royalty linger more than others? Some say it's because they were worshipped in life and cannot accept their fall. Others say that the sheer emotion, the jealousy, the fear, the desire traps them. Think of it as a wound that never healed. These were people who lived surrounded by luxury, but died surrounded by betrayal. They had everything to lose, and they lost it all. There's something poetic, even tragic about these hauntings. Power, it seems, demands remembrance. A farmer may die and fade into the soil. A king dies and becomes legend. And legends, they have weight. They have voice. They have footsteps that echo when no one is there. In ancient palaces across Asia, keepers speak of residual energy. In India's royal courts, servants refuse to sweep after midnight. They say the dead princes ride their invisible horses through the corridors, and to disturb them is to invite misfortune. In China's Forbidden City, guards on the night shift have quit in terror, swearing they heard silk slippers following them through moonlit courtyards. Cameras have caught doors opening on their own, even when locked, a whisper of the emperor's last command, perhaps. Ghosts in palaces are not merely spirits. They are symbols. They represent what history tries to forget: injustice, cruelty, heartbreak. They are the voices that power tried to silence, and that is why they remain, to remind, to accuse, to haunt. A royal haunting is never random. It often begins with a story cut short. A queen executed before her time, a child locked away to die, a servant who knew too much. Every legend you'll hear in the chapters to come began with truth. Beneath every myth is a record, sometimes buried, sometimes erased, of real people who suffered for the ambitions of others. Their pain became part of the palace itself. And over time, as generations passed, the walls began to hum. Not metaphorically, some say literally. Vibrations in the air, rhythmic like breathing. The more attuned claim they can sense the difference between a haunted palace and an empty one. A haunted palace feels awake. You don't walk through it, it walks through you. But perhaps the most chilling truth is this: the ghosts do not haunt everyone, they choose. They appear only to those who believe, or those who are burdened by guilt. Guards, maids, historians, even kings themselves have seen the impossible, only to deny it later. And when they finally confess, it's always the same: a shiver, a flash of cold air, a figure turning the corner, sometimes a face in the mirror, sometimes a whisper near the ear. I remember. And that whisper, that memory, is what draws us here tonight. As you listen, imagine yourself standing in one of those halls. The chandeliers sway, though no wind moves. A piano plays a single note from an empty ballroom. In the shadows, something unseen watches with patience older than time. You might think it's your mind playing tricks, until the silence answers back. This is not imagination, this is inheritance. The dead kings and queens of the world still guard their palaces, still roam their corridors, still repeat their final moments over and over again. Power has chained them to eternity, and we, the living, are merely visitors in their endless night. In the chapters ahead, we'll walk through their courts and crypts. We'll hear from soldiers who swore they saw Anne Boleyn carrying her severed head, from tourists who claim they walked through time in Versailles, from palace workers who will never set foot alone in the Forbidden City again. Each story will peel back another layer of history's silence, because the truth is not buried in books. It's in the whispers, the echoes, the footsteps that never fade. So keep listening, traveler. The night is long, and our ghosts are waiting.
The night settles over Hampton Court Palace like a velvet cloak. Its red brick towers, proud and ancient, rise against a moonlit sky. The River Thames glides silently nearby, reflecting the flicker of distant torches. Tourists have gone home. The gates are locked. Yet, within the echoing halls, someone or something still walks. It begins with the faint sound of silk on stone, a hurried shuffle, like a woman running, breathless, terrified. Guards have reported it for centuries, footsteps racing down the haunted gallery, followed by a single, desperate scream. And though the story is old, the scream never fades. To understand Hampton Court's ghosts, we must first understand its king, Henry VIII, the monarch whose 6 wives met tragedy as often as they met his love. This palace was his pride, his power, his prison of paranoia. Here he ate, hunted, plotted, and destroyed. Among his wives, one spirit refuses to rest, Catherine Howard, his 5th. Young, beautiful, and reckless, she became queen at 19, but she carried secrets of other lovers, and of a past she could never fully hide. When the king discovered her infidelity, his rage echoed louder than the palace bells. They say Catherine was seized during Mass. She broke free and ran, her feet pounding down the long gallery, her screams piercing the air. "Mercy! Henry! Mercy!" But the guards caught her before she could reach the king's chapel. She was dragged away, weeping, her cries swallowed by the vast stone halls. Weeks later, she was executed at the Tower of London. Yet her final cry never left Hampton Court. Every December, when the nights are longest, visitors speak of strange chills in the haunted gallery. The temperature drops without warning. Cameras fail. Some hear faint sobs, others a single shriek. One tourist claimed to see a pale figure rush past, her hands outstretched, eyes wide in terror. Security footage from 2003 captured something extraordinary. A wooden door, bolted from the inside, suddenly burst open. Moments later, a figure, tall, draped in white, appeared in the frame, only to vanish seconds later. The guards called it the Gray Lady, but those who know the palace's darker history say otherwise. It was Catherine Howard, they whisper, still running, still begging for mercy. But Catherine is not alone. Her cousin, Anne Boleyn, Henry's 2nd wife, also haunts these grounds. Anne once lived here in glory, hosting masques, music, and banquets that dazzled England's court. Yet she too was condemned, accused of adultery and witchcraft. On the eve of her death, she wrote that she was, quote, ready to meet God. But perhaps God was not ready for her. At night, servants have seen a headless woman gliding through the palace's courtyard, holding a lantern in one hand and her own head in the other. The scent of roses follows her, though no roses bloom there in winter, a symbol, perhaps, of the garden she once ruled and the thorns that destroyed her. Officially, the palace no longer speaks of hauntings, but off the record, staff tell another story. One night, a guard named Thomas, stationed outside the Chapel Royal, heard soft weeping. The gallery lights flickered, and a woman's voice, high trembling, called out, "Forgive me." Thinking a tourist had been locked inside, he searched every room. They were empty. Yet the sobbing continued, closer now, almost beside his ear. Then silence. When he turned, the gallery behind him was lit, though he'd switched off every light minutes earlier. His radio crackled. Another guard's voice came through. "Tom, are you okay? The motion sensors show someone in your hall." But he was alone. In the Queen's chamber, Footsteps echo when no one walks. Curtains sway though windows are sealed tight. A mirror once used by Catherine Howard is said to hold her reflection still. Staff have covered it with cloth, claiming it looks back. A paranormal team once filmed there overnight. Every recording failed during the witching hour. The few who have dared stay past midnight tell of a perfume, faint and floral, lingering like breath. Then comes a chill, and a voice, soft but near. "Henry, please." Skeptics call these stories imagination, fueled by centuries of retelling, but the palace's own records show otherwise. In 1912, a group of restorers refused to work after sunset, claiming they'd seen a white shape rushing towards them. In 1979, a curator fainted after hearing whispers in an empty gallery. Even the British royal family has acknowledged the legends, though they do not speak of them publicly. But here's what makes Hampton Court's haunting different. It isn't about revenge. It's about desperation. Catherine Howard doesn't seek vengeance. She seeks forgiveness. Her ghost doesn't attack. It runs, endlessly, reliving the moment before her death. A loop of terror that centuries cannot break.
Walk the gallery today, and you might feel it, the strange pull of the past. The air hums faintly, as if charged with grief. The portraits of long-dead nobles seem to follow you. Even your own footsteps sound foreign, mismatched, as though another pair walks beside you, just out of sight. And if you're unlucky, or perhaps lucky, you'll hear it. The faint rustle of a gown, the breath of a frightened girl, the echo of her plea. "Mercy." No one answers. Henry VIII himself is said to haunt the nearby chapel. His heavy boots echo on the flagstones, accompanied by the scent of tobacco and the faint jingle of spurs. Those who have felt his presence describe a weight in the room, a pressure that tightens the chest. Some even report hearing a growl, low, animalistic, followed by silence. Historians believe Henry's spirit may linger not out of guilt, but pride. The palace was his creation, his statement of dominance. To leave it would be to surrender, and Henry VIII never surrendered. Every palace is a story, but Hampton Court is a living one. Its ghosts are not echoes, they are characters still performing the tragedy of power. The gallery remains their stage, the stone their script, the night their audience. Modern investigators using infrared sensors have captured unexplained heat patterns, moving human-shaped shadows, and cold spots that follow visitors through rooms. In 2015, a journalist documented hearing a faint hymn in the empty chapel. When he replayed the recording later, a woman's voice overlapped his own, singing, softly, the old Latin phrase, "Miserere me Deus." Have mercy on me, God. Perhaps that is Catherine Howard's curse, to run forever through time, always reaching for a door that will never open, always crying for mercy from a man who cannot hear her anymore. Perhaps the palace itself holds her memory hostage, refusing to let it go. Or perhaps she chooses to remain, bound by love twisted into terror. Either way, when the clock strikes 3 and the moonlight glints across the gallery's polished floor, the sound returns. Footsteps, sobs, the whisper of silk. Catherine runs again. The doors of Hampton Court will open tomorrow to crowds of laughing tourists. They will take photos, buy souvenirs, and admire the beauty of Tudor architecture. But when night falls and the last echo fades, the palace will wake once more. The king will pace, the queen will scream,
And history, restless and relentless, will begin its haunting all over again.
The golden gates of Versailles glisten under the French moonlight, each spike tipped with centuries of blood and glory. From afar, the palace looks eternal, symmetrical perfection, a dream carved in stone. But step closer, and you'll feel it, the stillness beneath the beauty, the heavy, unblinking gaze of something ancient and aware. Versailles is not merely grand, it is alive, and sometimes it remembers. They say that no place in France carries the weight of its history quite like this palace. For beyond its gilded halls and endless mirrors, Versailles holds a secret. The reflection does not always belong to you. Versailles was born from the dreams of a man who believed himself divine, King Louis XIV, the Sun King. He transformed a hunting lodge into a symbol of godlike power. Every garden path, every fountain, every chandelier bowed to his vision. But grandeur comes with a price, and pride, they say, leaves shadows. Louis's successors inherited not just his palace, but his curse. Behind every mirror, beneath every portrait, there lingers a trace of the monarchy's downfall. A whisper of the guillotine, a scent of blood masked by perfume. Versailles became not just a royal residence, but a monument to obsession and decay. And within its walls, the past never died. By day, the Hall of Mirrors dazzles with light. 17 massive windows face 17 mirrors, reflecting the world 1,000 times over. Tourists stroll its length, marveling at the chandeliers, unaware that in this very hall kings were crowned, queens danced, and revolutions began. But at night, the mirrors turn dark. The reflections shift when no one moves, and those who stayed after hours tell stories they swore they'd never repeat. One caretaker, in the 1950s, claimed that as he locked up, he saw a ballroom full of people, hundreds of them, dressed in powdered wigs and silk. Music filled the air, faint and haunting, like strings from another world. But when he blinked, the hall was empty, silent. The mirrors showed nothing but his own pale face, drenched in cold sweat. Another witness, a guard on patrol, reported hearing footsteps behind him in the gallery. When he turned, a woman stood there, elegant, regal, her gown shimmering with candlelight. "It's too late," she whispered. Then she vanished into the mirror beside her. No spirit haunts Versailles more than Marie Antoinette. Her life was a spectacle, pearls, diamonds, laughter, until it became tragedy. During the French Revolution, she was dragged from her palace, imprisoned, and executed. But her spirit, they say, still wanders the gardens she once adored, searching for a world that no longer exists.
The most famous encounter happened not to a medium or a guard, but to two ordinary women, Charlotte Anne Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, visiting Versailles in 1901. They were scholars from England walking through the Petit Trianon, Marie Antoinette's private estate, when suddenly the air changed. The light grew dim, the sounds of the world faded, and the landscape around them seemed wrong. Older, quieter. They saw people dressed in 18th century clothing, silent and pale. One man warned them away, another glared as they passed. Then, near a small pavilion, they saw her. A woman in a white dress, sketching in the garden, her face serene but sad. The women later swore it was Marie Antoinette, moments before the storm of revolution reached her. Their account, known as the Versailles time slip, became one of the most famous supernatural encounters in history. Critics tried to explain it as illusion, mass hysteria, or a shared dream. But those who've walked the Trianon Gardens on misted afternoons say the same thing. The air feels thinner there, as if time itself bends. The Petit Trianon was Marie Antoinette's sanctuary, a place to escape the court's venom, to play its simplicity. She raised sheep, held picnics, and laughed freely, unaware that the world beyond the gates was collapsing. Now that laughter returns as an echo. Groundskeepers tell of music drifting from the Queen's music room at midnight, soft piano notes, followed by the faint hum of a woman's voice. When they open the doors, the sound stops, and the air is thick with perfume, jasmine, her favorite scent. Some claim to see her reflection in the glass of the music cabinet, serene, composed, as if waiting for a melody that will never end. In the corridors near her private chambers, mirrors fog from within. A guide once claimed she saw handprints appear on the glass while she was alone. She fled, refusing ever to work the night shift again. When the revolution reached Versailles, the palace trembled. The mob that had once cheered their king now roared for blood. They stormed the gates, tearing through the gilded corridors. Servants hid beneath tables. Courtiers fled through secret passages. It is said the palace itself groaned, the chandeliers swaying though no wind blew, the mirrors rippling like water. That violence, that fear, etched itself into the walls. Paranormal investigators claim Versailles is not haunted by one ghost, but by an event, a moment in time, replaying itself endlessly, like a record stuck on a single tragic note. Visitors have reported feeling overwhelming dread near the Queen's staircase. Some faint, others hear shouts, "À la lanterne," the ancient cry for execution. And then, just as suddenly, silence.
One particular mirror in the Hall of Mirrors has a story all its own. Restoration experts discovered faint discolorations beneath its surface, reddish streaks sealed behind centuries of polish. Legend says that during the storming of the palace, blood splattered across it. The artisans who restored it refused to remove the stain, calling it a scar too old to heal. Even now, guests say that in that mirror, their reflections sometimes blink when they do not. A paranormal researcher once recorded the room overnight. The video showed light distortions, cold bursts on thermal imaging, and at precisely 3:15 a.m., the shadow of a woman moving across the glass. No entry, no exit, just reflection. A corridor near the king's chambers is notorious among staff. They call it le couloir des murmures, the corridor of whispers. During late hours, one can hear faint conversations, laughter, even music drifting through the air. But the rooms are empty, the lights off. One historian described walking there after midnight. It was as if the palace itself was alive, he said. The air was warm, and I could hear people dancing, the rustle of silk, the tap of shoes. But when I looked around, I was alone, completely alone. He paused before the end of the hall, where a mirror stood, tall and cracked, and saw behind him not his own reflection, but a ballroom full of dancers. When he blinked, they were gone. Only the echo of applause remained.
Not all spirits of Versailles were royal. One of the oldest tales tells of a gardener who served under Louis XV. He was loyal, proud, and cruelly dismissed for a mistake not his own. Heartbroken, he drowned himself in the fountains of the Grand Canal. Since then, guards patrolling at night have seen a man in mud-stained breeches trimming invisible hedges, his face obscured by shadow. Those who try to approach say he turns, whispers something, and disappears into the mist. The grass, they swear, still bends where he walked. There is an old superstition among the palace caretakers: never look into a mirror at Versailles after midnight. The mirrors, they say, are not mere glass, but windows between worlds. Some claim that during cleaning, faces appear beside their own, powdered faces with eyes too dark, watching silently. Others report hearing sighs from behind the glass. A restorer working in 1992 swore that while polishing a mirror, she felt a hand brush her shoulder. She turned, no one, but the mirror reflected a woman in 18th century dress, smiling faintly. She looked alive, the woman later said. Too alive.
Perhaps the most unsettling truth is that Versailles doesn't just hold its history, it relives it. Energy lingers in every marble step, every velvet curtain. The air is thick with memory. And memory, when bound to tragedy, becomes a haunting all its own. Psychic researchers describe Versailles as a recording palace, a place where time folds in on itself. The ghosts are not conscious souls, they say, but fragments of emotion, loops of fear, love, and despair replaying endlessly. Yet others disagree. They've spoken with voices, captured whispers on tape, and felt unseen presences brush past in the empty halls. The palace is more than stone. It is an echo chamber of humanity's greatest illusions: power, beauty, eternity. Stand alone in the Hall of Mirrors at dusk. The golden light fades, and your reflection multiplies endlessly. 1,000 versions of you stare back, but are they all you? Watch long enough, and you might see one turn its head before you do. Some say that's the moment Versailles chooses to remember you, to make you part of its story. Because at Versailles, time is not linear. The living and the dead dance together, forever reflected, forever watching. As dawn breaks, the palace awakens once more. Sunlight floods the halls, and the ghosts retreat into their glass prisons. Tourists arrive, laughing, cameras clicking, unaware that they walk through a dream built on blood and mirrors. And somewhere, deep in the garden of the Petit Trianon, a queen in white still sketches, her eyes fixed on a horizon that never changes. Her empire is gone. Her crown is dust. But her reflection lives forever. The wind that sweeps across the highlands carries stories of freedom, of betrayal, and of ghosts. In Scotland, history is not a distant memory. It breathes in the mist that clings to the locks, whispers in the ruins of castles, and lingers in the echo of bagpipes carried by the night air. But nowhere is that haunting stronger than within the cold, echoing walls of Holyrood Palace, where the restless spirit of a queen still mourns what was stolen from her: her crown, her child, and her peace. This is the tale of Mary, Queen of Scots, a woman born to rule, fated to suffer, and destined never to rest.
Holyrood Palace, Edinburgh, majestic, ancient, and crowned by tragedy. Its grand stone facade hides secrets behind every arch and tapestry.
The palace sits at the end of the Royal Mile like a silent witness to centuries of intrigue. Tourists walk its halls by day, marveling at royal portraits and polished floors, unaware that by night, the same corridors tremble with footsteps of the dead. The palace is divided in two, the king's side and the queen's. But even in death, Mary has claimed it all. The North Tower, especially, is said to be hers, forever echoing with the final screams of her loyal servant, David Rizzio. It was a cold night in March 1566 when betrayal stained Holyrood's floors with blood. Mary was in her private supper chamber, heavily pregnant, dining with a few trusted attendants, among them her secretary and close friend, David Rizzio. Rumors had already spread that Rizzio was too close to the Queen, that he was whispering into her ear, guiding her choices, perhaps even more. Her husband, Lord Darnley, consumed by jealousy and pride, decided to act. The door burst open. A dozen armed men flooded the small room. Darnley seized Mary by the arm as she rose in shock. Rizzio clung to her skirts, begging for mercy. But Darnley's men tore him away, stabbing him again and again, 56 times, right before the Queen's eyes. Blood spattered across her gown and the chamber walls. They dragged his body through the next room and left it in the corridor like a butchered animal. The Queen's screams filled the palace. They say that even now, on still nights, those screams return, muffled, distant, but real. When morning came, the servants tried to wash the blood from the wooden floorboards, but the stain wouldn't lift. No amount of scrubbing, no layer of polish could hide it. Centuries later, after countless renovations, a faint reddish mark still lingers in that same spot, near the door where Rizzio fell. Guides who lead evening tours sometimes find droplets of moisture forming there, though the air is dry. They say it's condensation. Locals say it's Rizzio's blood seeping back through time, refusing to fade. And when night falls, the chamber turns cold, unnaturally so. Visitors have reported the sudden smell of iron, like rust and blood, and a heavy weight in their chest. Cameras malfunction. Some have claimed to hear soft music, the kind Rizzio would play for his queen, a mournful tune on a lute that fades into silence the moment you acknowledge it.
Mary never recovered from that night. The betrayal shattered what little stability she had. Within a year, her husband Darnley himself was dead, his house blown up under mysterious circumstances, his body found strangled in the garden. Whispers of Mary's involvement spread across Scotland. Her enemies closed in. She was forced to flee her own kingdom, leaving behind everything she loved, her palace, her crown, and her newborn son, James. But queens like Mary do not go quietly into history. They leave imprints, powerful emotional echoes that refuse to die. In the years that followed her execution in England, witnesses began to see her return. Her spirit, still draped in regal sorrow, began to walk the halls of Holyrood once more. They call her the Lady in Black. Late at night, when the palace is silent, guards have reported seeing a tall, pale woman gliding through the North Tower, her gown dark as mourning cloth. Her face is hidden beneath a black veil. She moves slowly, as if in grief, her footsteps making no sound. When approached, she turns, and her veil lifts just enough to reveal tear-streaked cheeks and eyes that burn with anguish. Then she vanishes into the darkness, leaving behind the scent of roses and the echo of weeping. One guard in 1972, a man named Ewan McCallum, refused to work night shifts after an encounter in the Queen's apartments. He described hearing a faint rustle, like silk brushing the air. Turning around, he saw a woman standing in the doorway. Her hands were clasped, he said. She looked right at me, through me, as if she saw someone else. He fled,
trembling as the sound of sobbing filled the hall behind him. Mary's ghost is not angry. She is heartbroken. She appears most often near her bedchamber or on the staircase where she once stood pleading for Rizzio's life. Tourists visiting during the winter months often report hearing low sobs, so soft they almost blend with the wind. Others describe a sudden drop in temperature, followed by the faint scent of lavender, a fragrance Mary was known to wear. Some nights, even modern royals have claimed to feel her presence. When Queen Elizabeth II visited Holyrood, she reportedly requested that her private chambers not be in the North Tower. The staff never gave an official reason, but palace insiders whispered, "The Queen does not sleep where the other Queen walks."
David Rizzio, too, lingers in Holyrood's shadow. His ghost has been seen kneeling by the fireplace or standing near the dining table where he last played music. A faint humming sometimes fills the room before his apparition appears, a melody that no one can quite identify. Witnesses say his figure is transparent, shimmering, and always afraid. He looks toward the door, as though waiting for his killers to burst through again. Then he fades, leaving behind only the echo of hurried footsteps and a whisper in Italian, "Aiutatemi, help me." Some nights, particularly near the anniversary of Mary's execution, February 8th, 1587, the palace takes on a strange energy. The lights flicker, shadows move where there should be none, and a spectral procession is seen gliding through the corridors, torchbearers, guards, and in the center, a woman in a white gown walking steadily toward the courtyard. Her face is calm, her head held high, but her eyes are full of sadness. Witnesses say she disappears at the threshold, the same spot where she once left Holyrood for the last time as a free queen. The air afterward tastes metallic, and the faint echo of a blade dropping on wood can be heard far away. Holyrood is more than a palace. It's a cage made of time. Every corridor, every chamber is layered with memory, moments replaying endlessly like ripples on still water. Mary's tragedy is the heartbeat of the place, and the walls remember her pain. Psychic researchers who have visited the palace describe a charged stillness. Instruments record electromagnetic fluctuations, cold spots, and unexplained murmurs. Some have even captured voices, faint but distinct, calling out names, whispering prayers. One recording from 2009 contained what sounded like a woman saying, "They are coming." When slowed down, another voice answered, "Run, my queen." It's said that no Scottish monarch has ever worn the crown at Holyrood without misfortune following. Perhaps the curse was born the night Rizzio died, or perhaps it began centuries earlier when ambition first poisoned loyalty. Either way, the palace seems to feed on power and sorrow alike. Even now, during royal ceremonies, lights flicker in the Queen's chamber. Doors open and close as if moved by unseen hands. During one modern restoration, workers found strange marks scratched into the stone beneath the floorboards, symbols resembling the initials MR. Whether Mary's own or left by her loyalists, no one knows. But the energy in that room, they say, is unlike any other. It feels like the air is watching you, as if she's still here, deciding whether to trust you.
History has painted Mary both as martyr and sinner, victim and conspirator. But those who have felt her presence in Holyrood say her ghost carries no malice, only grief. She was betrayed by those she loved, condemned by those she served, and forgotten by those who came after. Her spirit lingers not to haunt, but to remember, and to be remembered. Perhaps that's the cruelest part of her fate, that she must watch forever as strangers walk through the home that was once hers, telling her story in whispers and selling postcards of her pain. If you ever find yourself standing before Holyrood Palace after dark, when the city sleeps and the wind has stilled, listen carefully. From somewhere within, faint and steady, comes the sound of a woman's voice, soft, trembling, reciting a prayer in Latin, the same prayer Mary spoke before her execution. It begins with a plea for forgiveness. It ends with a vow, "My soul belongs to Scotland." Then the night falls silent again, as though the palace itself exhales. And if you look up toward the tower, you might glimpse her, the lost queen, standing by the window, staring into the endless mist. A ghost not of vengeance, but of sorrow. A ruler forever dethroned, yet never forgotten. Beijing's heart is guarded by red walls and golden roofs, vast, ancient, and majestic. It is called the Forbidden City, a world once closed to all but the emperor, his concubines, and the chosen few who dared to serve them. For 500 years, it was the center of China's universe, the pulse of power, the breath of dynasties. But now, as dusk falls over the carved dragon eaves and the city hums with modern life beyond the walls, an eerie stillness settles within. Tourists leave. The gates creak shut. And in that moment, the Forbidden City becomes what it has always been, a kingdom of ghosts. For in this palace of emperors and empresses, of executions and betrayals, not all who ruled here ever left. The Forbidden City is enormous, over 9,000 rooms, courtyards like labyrinths, corridors where light fades before it touches the ground. The very stones seem to hum with memory. Between the 15th and 20th centuries, more than 20 emperors lived and died here. Each left behind more than a legacy. Some left whispers, screams, and shadows that move without light. Guards who patrol the grounds after midnight speak of voices calling from the empty courtyards. They hear laughter, soft, girlish, echoing from the Hall of Supreme Harmony. Others have seen a woman in white gliding silently beneath the lanterns, her long hair flowing like a veil. They called her the Crying Concubine, and the air grows icy in her wake.
The Forbidden City's most tragic spirit is said to be Emperor Guangxu, the young ruler who loved his country but was silenced by his own blood. In the late 19th century, during the dying years of the Qing dynasty, Guangxu dreamed of reforming China, but his aunt, the powerful Empress Dowager Cixi, feared his vision. She seized control, imprisoned him in his own palace, and turned his throne into a cage. For years, he sat alone in the hall of mental cultivation, surrounded by scrolls and ghosts. Servants said he would pace at night, whispering to himself, "Why will heaven not see?" His meals were delivered in silence, his words intercepted, his courtiers spies. Even the birds in his garden fell quiet. And one winter morning in 1908, he was found dead, poisoned. The Empress herself died the next day. Coincidence or divine justice? History never decided. Yet some say the emperor's spirit remains, trapped where his freedom ended. Today, the Hall of Mental Cultivation stands still, preserved like a shrine. Visitors who step inside describe an overwhelming heaviness, as though the air itself resists their presence. In one corner, where the emperor's desk once stood, many have reported the sound of soft weeping. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady tears falling into silence.
In 1995, a security officer claimed to hear it while locking up. Thinking someone had been left behind, he searched every room. When he opened the imperial study, the sound stopped, but the chair behind the emperor's desk was rocking slowly as if someone had just risen. He left his post that night and never returned. They say the emperor weeps for the empire he could not save, a nation that slipped from his hands, not through war, but betrayal. In the Palace of Tranquil Longevity, there lies an ancient well, sealed with stone. Locals call it Zhen Fi Jing, the well of the true concubine. Its story is darker still. During the Boxer Rebellion of 1900, chaos swept through Beijing. The imperial court prepared to flee. The Empress Dowager ordered her servants to take with them only those worthy of the dynasty. One concubine, Zhen Fi, beloved by the young Emperor Guangxu, begged to go with him, but Cixi despised her for her beauty, for her influence, for the emperor's love. Cixi's reply was cold and simple: throw her down the well. And so they did. Her body was discovered months later, adorned still in her royal silks, her face twisted in terror. Now, even after more than a century, guards report hearing sobs near the sealed well. Some nights, a woman's reflection appears in the surface water, though the well is closed. She wears white, her hair loose, her hands reaching upward. Her voice is faint, pleading. They call her the crying concubine, or sometimes simply the one who cannot rest.
The Forbidden City was not only home to emperors and concubines, but also to soldiers and eunuchs, men who lived and died by their master's moods. One tale speaks of a royal guard who failed to prevent an assassination attempt centuries ago. His punishment was swift, beheading in front of the Meridian Gate. Now, on nights of mist and thunder, visitors near that gate claimed to see a headless figure marching slowly through the courtyard, carrying a lantern in one hand and his sword in the other. The light sways as he walks, casting shadows that twist across the walls, but his footsteps make no sound. A modern tourist once captured a faint outline of such a figure on camera in 2011. Experts called it a trick of the fog. The photographer swore otherwise, saying the figure was there and the air smelled of incense and blood. The most persistent apparition, though, is the woman in white who roams the outer courtyards. Guards and maintenance workers have seen her countless times, pale, expressionless, floating rather than walking. Her robes shimmer like silk, but no fabric has ever been found that catches the moonlight that way. Some say she is concubine Zhen, forever wandering in search of her emperor. Others insist she is one of the countless nameless women who perished within the walls. Concubines buried alive, servants executed, wives silenced. The Forbidden City was paradise gilded with terror. Behind its beauty, cruelty reigned. When the woman in white appears, birds stop singing. Even the wind pauses. She glides past the lanterns, and every flame flickers low. One guard, trembling, described it. She turned and looked at me. Her face was perfect, except for her eyes. They were black, not dark, black, like two holes where the world had fallen in. The Forbidden City's architecture is designed for silence, yet silence here never truly exists. During the Cultural Revolution, when the palace was used for storage and offices, workers reported strange noises, dragging chains, whispers behind the walls, the faint hum of silk rustling in empty rooms. One night, an electrician on duty swore he saw a group of shadowy figures walking in procession toward the Hall of Supreme Harmony, their forms indistinct, their footsteps synchronized. When he called out, they vanished.
He later learned that hall was where condemned officials were brought before execution. Perhaps the dead still returned to bow before the dragon throne one last time.
Each dawn, the palace once echoed with ritual bells, marking the emperor's morning prayers. Those bells were silenced long ago. Yet, even now, people near the Forbidden City claim to hear them faintly before sunrise, low, resonant, and impossibly clear. In 2004, a group of joggers passing the outer wall at 4 a.m. heard the bells. "We thought it was a recording," one said, "but it came from inside, deep inside." The palace, of course, was empty. Historians believe the bells once symbolized the emperor's divine authority, a bridge between man and heaven. Now, perhaps, they are reminders of a time when heaven stopped listening. The Forbidden City has seen the rise and fall of dynasties. Each emperor feared the same thing, that his power would outlive his soul. They built altars to heaven, burned offerings to ancestors, and prayed that their spirits would find peace. Yet those prayers seem unanswered, for power once seized is hard to surrender, even in death. Some psychics say the palace is saturated with imperial energy, the weight of 1,000 commands, decrees, executions. The very layout, designed with perfect symmetry to reflect cosmic order, now traps the disorder of restless souls. The architecture itself, meant to harmonize heaven and earth, instead binds them together, an endless loop of the living and the dead. They say that on the anniversary of Guangzhu's death, the Hall of Mental Cultivation glows faintly from within, though it remains sealed. Those brave enough to look through the lattice windows claim to see a young man sitting at a desk, his robes plain, his posture weary. A candle burns before him, though no flame can exist inside. He raises his hand as if to write, but the brush never touches paper. His face is sorrowful. Then a tear rolls down, a tear of light that fades into darkness. And if you stand long enough, you might hear him whisper, "Why did she betray me?" Then the vision fades, leaving only the cold urn and the feeling that someone still watches. Modern guards, even under strict orders not to discuss superstition, speak in hushed tones about what they've seen. In interviews kept anonymous, several described phantom footsteps echoing through courtyards, unexplained lights in sealed rooms, and the sound of distant crying. One said, "It's always a man's voice, young, sad. It comes from the hall, always from the hall." Even tourists have their stories. A woman from Shanghai recalled taking a photograph near the gate of heavenly purity. She said, "When I looked later, there was someone standing behind me, a man in a golden robe. But when the photo was taken, I was alone."
The Forbidden City is no ordinary museum. It's a mirror of human ambition, the beauty and the cruelty of power made eternal. Within its walls are the echoes of laughter, mourning, and command. Every dynasty built on the bones of the last. Every throne taken by betrayal. Every secret sealed beneath lacquer and gold. The emperor who wept alone. The concubine who begged for mercy. The guard who still marches without a head. Their stories are not myths. They are the price of a kingdom that called itself divine. As night deepens over Beijing, the palace sinks into silence again. The moon drifts above the golden rooftops, pale as the ghosts below. Somewhere in the courtyard, a cry rises, faint, human, heartbreakingly sad. It drifts through the cypress trees and disappears into the endless sky. The emperor is crying again. And in that cry, all of China's sorrow seems to echo, a lament for the living and the dead alike. The River Thames glistens beneath the London night, dark as a blade. On its northern bank, rising from stone and history, stands one of the most haunted places on earth, the Tower of London. For nearly 1,000 years, its walls have witnessed betrayal, murder, and whispered prayers before death. It was a fortress, a palace, and a prison, but never merely a building. It is a monument to power, and power, as history has shown, leaves ghosts in its wake. Tonight, as the city hums beyond its gates, the tower breathes, quietly, but not peacefully. The tower was born in conquest. When William the Conqueror ordered its construction in 1078, he built it to dominate, to cast a shadow over London and to remind its people who ruled them. Its stone walls rose from blood-soaked earth, guarded by superstition and steel. From the beginning, the tower was meant to terrify. Over the centuries, kings added towers, moats, and dungeons. Each left behind not only architecture, but tragedy. The tower became the stage for royal executions, political purges, and secrets sealed in silence. It is said that every drop of blood spilled here soaked into the very stone, and that the stones remember.
Of all the tower's tales, none is more heartbreaking or more ghostly than that of the two little princes. In 1483, after the death of King Edward IV, his sons, Edward V, aged 12, and his brother, Richard, aged 9, were placed in the tower by their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, who had sworn to protect them. Weeks later, their coronation was cancelled. Richard declared them illegitimate and took the crown for himself. The boys were never seen again. For centuries, people whispered that Richard had them murdered, smothered as they slept, their bodies buried beneath the tower's stones. And though their bones were later found, their souls, it seems, never left. Guards have seen them, two small figures in nightshirts, hand in hand, wandering the stairs of the bloody tower. Their faces are pale, their eyes wide with confusion. They vanish when spoken to, leaving behind a sudden chill and the faint sound of sobbing. One yeoman warder, on duty in 1957, claimed to hear soft footsteps behind him on the stair. He said, "It sounded like children. When I turned, there was no one, only the candle flickering and the air cold as ice." Later, he found small wet footprints on the floor, though it hadn't rained that night. The most famous ghost in the tower wears neither crown nor smile, for she no longer has a head to wear one upon. Anne Boleyn, second wife of Henry VIII, was executed here on May 19, 1536, accused of adultery and treason. She was buried in the chapel just yards from the spot where her body fell, but her spirit never left the grounds. Witnesses describe seeing her near the Queen's house, gliding through the courtyard in a gown of white or deep green. Sometimes she carries her head beneath her arm. Other times she appears whole, calm, almost serene, as if still waiting for justice. The yeoman warders, known as the Beefeaters, have told her story for centuries, though few dared to speak her name aloud within the tower's walls after dark. In 1864, a soldier on guard near the chapel bayoneted what he thought was an intruder, a woman in a veil moving toward him. His weapon passed through her, and he fainted. When revived, he could only repeat, "It was her. I saw the Queen." And in 1933, a ghostly procession was seen inside the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula. Soldiers, priests, and mourners appeared, all walking in silence. At their center, Anne Boleyn, her face serene, her eyes open, her head resting in her hands. The vision faded as it reached the altar. There is another woman who haunts the tower, one whose name history forgot. She is called only the White Lady. Those who have seen her describe a woman standing near the White Tower, her gown flowing like mist,
her perfume heavy with roses. When she appears, ravens cry and the air turns bitterly cold. Visitors often feel a tap on the shoulder, only to turn and see nothing but empty air. Some say she's the spirit of a noblewoman executed unjustly. Others think she is every nameless victim of royal cruelty combined into one sorrowful presence. In 1978, a tourist fainted while touring the White Tower, claiming she'd seen a pale woman smiling at her from inside a glass display case, one containing a knight's armor. When she awoke, the case was empty, yet her shoulder bore a bruise shaped like a hand. The tower's soil has known many deaths, too many for peace. Queens, spies, lords and poets have all knelt beneath the executioner's blade on Tower Green. Lady Jane Grey, the 9 Days Queen, is one of them. She was only 17 when she was beheaded for treason in 1554. Witnesses say her ghost walks at dawn, the moment of her execution, dressed in white and holding a small prayer book. She is calm, they say, until she reaches the block. Then she drops the book, reaches out, and vanishes. Others have seen the spirit of Margaret Pole, Countess of Salisbury, the elderly noblewoman who refused to kneel before the axe. The executioner chased her around the scaffold, striking wildly until she fell in pieces. Now, in the stillness before sunrise, guards hear her footsteps running across the green, followed by a scream that never ends. The ravens of the tower are legend, living omens of Britain's fate. It is said that if they ever leave, the kingdom will fall. But the yeoman warders who care for them say the birds are uneasy at night. They grow restless when shadows move. Some refuse to perch near the Traitor's Gate, where prisoners once entered to die. In 2006, a raven named Thor was found dead near the chapel. The next night, the guards reported hearing wings flapping above the green, though no birds were seen. The sound went on for nearly 10 minutes, echoing like thunder. It was as if they were all leaving, one said. Perhaps they sense what the living cannot, the weight of souls beneath their feet.
Even in the age of cameras and science, the tower's ghosts persist. Security systems pick up motion in empty rooms. CCTV footage shows orbs of light darting through corridors. Guards report the scent of burning candles where none are lit. In 2001, a curator reviewing surveillance footage noticed a tall figure in Tudor dress walking through the Wakefield Tower. No reenactments were scheduled that day. And in 2013, a night guard reported hearing children laughing near the bloody tower. When he investigated, he found only his own footprints and 2 small ones beside them, leading into the wall. The Traitor's Gate still opens to the river. In old days, boats brought prisoners here, men and women whose crimes were often loyalty in disguise. As they entered, they passed beneath the carved royal crest and the Latin words, Domine salvum fer regem, God save the king. Few who entered ever saw daylight again. At night, water laps against the stones. Some say it carries whispers, names, prayers, cries for mercy. Others have seen a ghostly boat drifting through the fog, lanterns glowing faintly. Inside it, shadowed figures sit in silence, their faces pale, their heads bowed. The boat reaches the gate and then vanishes, swallowed by mist and time.
Among the tower's lesser-known spirits is a man seen only once every few decades. He appears in the Salt Tower, a tall, cloaked figure with glowing red eyes. Those who have met his gaze describe an overwhelming sense of dread. One guard who encountered him in 1974 collapsed, saying later that it felt like looking into death itself. The man turned and walked through the wall, leaving behind the scent of sulfur. Some believe he is the ghost of a medieval torturer. Others think he is something older, not a man but a shadow of cruelty, born from the centuries of suffering contained within these walls. Inside the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, where the executed were buried, hundreds of bones lie beneath the floor. Every name carved into the marble is a story unfinished. Guards who patrol the chapel late at night report flickering candles, though electric lights now line the walls. Sometimes they hear faint singing, Latin hymns from no human throat. And at the altar, when all is quiet, a shadow sometimes kneels, a woman's silhouette, motionless. Those who've seen it swear she wears a crown of light.
When the clock strikes 12, the tower becomes something else. Not a monument, not a museum, but a threshold. The air grows still, the river's murmur fades, and from deep within the walls comes the low sound of weeping. Some nights, footsteps echo through the corridors, the slow tread of soldiers, the soft rush of skirts, the whisper of prayers. The past wakes briefly, 1,000 years of shadows walking side by side. They say the tower never sleeps. Perhaps it cannot. It has seen too much, buried too many, silenced too often. And still, the ghosts remain, not out of vengeance, but memory. Because to forget them would be to erase the truth of what this place truly is, a monument not only to power, but to its price. At dawn, the ravens stir, and the tower returns to life. Tourists line up, cameras flash, guides tell the stories as legends, dark, dramatic, but harmless. Yet when night falls again, the air grows heavy. Somewhere near the green, a young queen walks once more to her death. 2 boys hold hands on the stairs. A headless woman drifts beneath the moonlight. And from the river comes the faint sound of oars, rowing toward the gate that never opens. The tower endures, and so do its ghosts. The air above Mysore shimmers like heat-borne smoke, but when the sun sets, the warmth gives way to whispers. Standing at the heart of the city is a palace so breathtaking that even the moonlight pauses before touching its domes. The Mysore Palace, jewel of the Wadiyar dynasty. Its ivory towers glow softly against the night sky. Its stained glass windows flicker like trapped stars. And yet, beneath its splendor, there is a sorrow older than the bricks themselves. The curse of a king, a dead prince, and a dynasty haunted by grief. Tonight, we walk through its gilded halls, where history meets the supernatural, and where even royalty wept under the weight of destiny.
The story begins in the early 17th century when Raja Wadiyar I rose against his overlord, the powerful Sri Rangapatna ruler, Tirumala Raja. The conquest was swift, but vengeance came cloaked as a curse. Legend says that Tirumala Raja's wife, Queen Alamel Amma, fled with the royal jewels before the invaders arrived. When cornered at the edge of the Kaveri River, she turned, raised her arms toward the heavens and cried,
May the Mysore kings never beget heirs. May this palace see sorrow in every generation." Then she leapt into the river and vanished beneath the water. From that day, the curse took root. For nearly 400 years, the Wadiyars struggled to keep their line alive. Princes died young, heirs were born only to perish mysteriously, and every new king faced tragedy before his crown could warm to his head. The Mysore palace, it seemed, had been condemned to echo with unending grief, a palace of tears. The present-day palace, built in the early 20th century after the original burned down, is a masterpiece of Indo-Saracenic architecture. It dazzles the eye with domes of gold, rosewood doors, and painted ceilings depicting gods and heroes. But grandeur cannot hide sorrow. Visitors have often remarked that at night the palace feels alive, as if it inhales and exhales through its corridors. The chandeliers sway slightly when no wind moves. Footsteps echo in empty halls. Guards claim to hear anklets jingling softly in the darkness, like a queen still walking toward her lover, centuries too late. The people of Mysore call these sounds the echoes of Alimel Amma, for they believe her spirit returned to claim what was once hers. Each year, during the Dasahera festival, Mysore Palace bursts into light, over 100,000 bulbs illuminating its facade like a dream of fire. The crowd cheers, the band plays, and the royal family steps onto the balcony to greet their people. But beneath the spectacle lies a secret. Photographers who stay late after the crowds disperse often capture strange orbs in their lenses, blue and gold lights hovering in the Durbar Hall or drifting above the marble courtyard. Some dismiss them as lens flares, but others swear they move with purpose, circling the royal thrones before disappearing through the walls. A palace guard named Harish once told his story to a local journalist. "It was 2 a.m. I was patrolling near the hall when I saw the lights, 3 of them, moving together. They floated to the main staircase and stopped. For a moment, I saw something. A man, tall, wearing a turban and royal robes. Then he was gone. The lights just faded. He never took another night shift again."
In the 1970s, tragedy struck again. Prince Jayachamaraja Wadiyar's heir, a young man beloved for his kindness, fell gravely ill. His death was sudden, unexplained, and eerily similar to the mysterious illnesses that had taken generations of Wadiyar princes before him. The people whispered, the curse had claimed another. On the anniversary of his death, palace workers began reporting strange happenings. The sound of Veena strings playing in an empty hall, doors opening and closing without a touch, the scent of sandalwood, the prince's favorite, filling the air. A maid, interviewed years later, confessed, "Sometimes at night, we hear footsteps on the marble, slow and steady, like someone walking toward the throne room. Once I looked down from the balcony and saw him, the prince, standing by the pillar, smiling. But when I called out, he vanished." Since then, locals refer to him as the ghost prince of Mysore, the spirit who still watches over his cursed home. The palace's Kalyana Mantapa, the grand marriage hall, is lined with paintings of the Wadiyar dynasty. Their eyes, meticulously painted, follow you as you walk. During restorations in 2003, artists working late claimed the portrait seemed to shift in the candlelight. One figure, that of a young prince, appeared to be crying. Drops of moisture formed beneath his painted eyes, streaking down the canvas. The restorers wiped them away, but they returned the next morning. The staff sealed the room for several days. When reopened, the painting was mysteriously dry, but the marble floor below bore faint circular stains, as though tears had fallen there for centuries.
Within the older section of the palace lies a locked room known to few, a chamber sealed after the death of a royal child in the early 1900s. The story goes that the boy died suddenly, his laughter echoing through the halls even after his passing. When the family tried to reopen the room years later, servants refused. They said they still heard a child giggling inside, especially on full moon nights. Modern visitors aren't told of this room, but security personnel speak of it quietly. One said he once heard a ball bouncing on the marble floor behind the locked door. He thought maybe a cat got in, but when I opened it, nothing. Just a small wooden toy lying in the center of the room. He never touched it.
The Wadiyars were warriors before they were kings, and legend holds that during stormy nights, when thunder rolls across the Deccan sky, ghostly riders gallop through the palace courtyard. Their horses' hooves strike sparks, but no marks remain on the ground. During one monsoon night in 1989, several residents near the palace claimed they saw flickering torches moving along the battlements, though no guards were stationed there. The sound of galloping echoed across the city, fading only when the rain began to fall. Old men in the city still tell that story, nodding gravely. The old kings were riding again, perhaps to remind us that Mysore still belongs to them. One of the palace's most mysterious figures is the Veiled Lady, a woman seen gliding along the main staircase, her face covered by a long silk veil. She appears most often on nights when the moon is bright. Sometimes she is seen looking out through the lattice windows toward the Chamundi hills, where the goddess Chamundeshwari, protector of the Wadiyars, is believed to reside. Who is she? Some believe she's Alamelamma herself, returned to see the dynasty she cursed. Others think she is a royal mother, eternally mourning the sons taken by fate. Whatever she is, witnesses describe her presence as unbearably sad, a beauty drowned in grief. One visitor said, "I couldn't see her face, but I felt her tears. It was as if the whole palace was crying through her." The palace is filled with sounds, chandeliers humming faintly, wooden doors creaking, faint sighs in corridors where no one walks. Engineers have blamed old plumbing, shifting foundations, or the hum of city traffic. But locals know better. They say the palace breathes with the sorrow of its kings. Every tragedy that befell the Wadiyars has been marked by strange phenomena. Lights flickering, mirrors clouding, bells ringing on their own. Even modern security cameras have captured fleeting shapes, shadows walking past pillars, reflections that vanish mid-frame. A night watchman once told a visiting journalist, "Sometimes the palace cries. You can hear it like rain inside the walls." The curse of Alamelamma still lingers. Even in recent times, when a new heir was born to the royal family, celebrations were held quietly, almost cautiously, as though joy itself might anger the spirits that guard the dynasty. Before every coronation, priests from the Chamundeshwari temple perform ancient rituals to bless the child and to keep the queen's curse asleep. Yet according to local tradition, her spirit still visits once a year, on the night of her death. At the stroke of midnight, a faint shimmer of blue light is said to rise from the direction of the Kaveri River and drift toward Mysore Palace before fading into its domes. Some believe Alamelamma's ghost has softened with time. In the late 1990s, a royal descendant claimed to have dreamt of her, not as a vengeful spirit, but as a sorrowful woman in white holding out her jewels. "She told me," the prince said, "that she never wanted to curse us. She only wanted justice." Since then, the royal family has made annual offerings to her spirit. Flowers, incense, and the same jewels she once wore laid reverently at the foot of the Kaveri. And every year on that night, the palace is said to glow a little brighter, as though the tears have momentarily stopped. Yet, even forgiveness cannot erase sorrow. Locals believe the ghost prince still wanders his ancestral halls, his footsteps echoing faintly after the midnight chime. Tourists on guided tours have captured his likeness in photographs, a faint outline of a man in royal dress near the Durbar Hall balcony, his expression calm, his gaze fixed on eternity. The palace guards, though forbidden to speak, whisper that when the prince appears, the lights dim slightly and the scent of jasmine fills the air. Then comes the sound of a veena, soft, distant, like the lullaby of a mother long gone. When dawn breaks, the Mysore palace returns to splendor. Tourists pour in, cameras click, children laugh. The golden domes glitter as though sorrow never touched them. But those who've seen the palace at midnight know the truth. They felt the air heavy with grief, heard the invisible footsteps, and sensed the centuries-old tears that still flow through the marble veins of the palace. Because behind the beauty of Mysore lies a wound, one that time cannot heal. A queen's curse, a dynasty's sorrow, and a prince who never found peace. The palace remains, radiant, magnificent, eternal. But within its walls, the night still cries.
At the western edge of Vienna, where the city gives way to rolling green hills, stands a palace that once ruled an empire, Schönbrunn. Golden, vast, and radiant under the Austrian sun, it was meant to be the world's most beautiful refuge, a symbol of imperial perfection. Yet behind the marble walls and mirrored halls, the palace hides something colder, the echo of a woman who refuses to be forgotten. For Schönbrunn, like every palace built on power, has its ghosts. And the grandest of them all is Empress Maria Theresa, the matriarch of the Habsburg dynasty, a woman who ruled Europe by will and fear, and who, even in death, cannot rest. When the gates of Schönbrunn swing open, light floods every corridor. Its Baroque facade gleams gold, its windows blaze like captured fire. The gardens stretch endlessly, fountains singing softly to one another. But as the sun sets, the light turns to amber, and the palace begins to change. The laughter of tourists fades, the breeze stills, and from somewhere deep within the palace, perhaps near the mirror room, perhaps from the grand staircase, comes the faint sound of footsteps. They are steady, regal, deliberate. Those who have heard them say the air tightens with a presence, not threatening, but commanding, as if the Empress herself has returned to ensure that her empire is still in order. Maria Theresa reigned for 40 years, ruling over an empire that spanned half of Europe. She was a mother to 16 children, a sovereign who fought wars, shaped nations, and enforced morality with iron conviction. Schönbrunn was her favorite palace, her sanctuary, her stage, her prison of power. But behind the splendor was sorrow. Many of her children died young. Her beloved husband, Emperor Francis I, collapsed suddenly in the palace in 1765. They say that after his death, she wore mourning black for the rest of her life, filling Schönbrunn's halls with grief. She turned her grand palace into a mausoleum of memory, candles burning at all hours, prayers whispered into silence. And though she died in 1780, her spirit has never left. The Empress, it seems, still walks the corridors of her favorite palace, checking, commanding, mourning. The earliest reports of the haunting date back to the 1800s, when palace attendants began to speak of the sound of the Empress's keys. In life, Maria Theresa carried a chain of keys at her waist. Servants learned to recognize her by their metallic chime. Even now, when night settles and the last door is locked, guards claim to hear that unmistakable sound, the gentle, rhythmic clinking of keys against silk. It moves through the empty halls, always steady, always purposeful. The footsteps follow, soft at first, then growing louder until they seem just behind you. When you turn, the air smells faintly of rosewater and incense, her favorite scent. Then, silence.
Deep inside the palace lies a lesser-known chamber, unmarked on public maps. It was once Maria Theresa's private chapel, where she prayed daily for her husband's soul. Servants called it Das Tränenzimmer, the Room of Tears. Here she wept in solitude, lighting candles for hours, her sobs echoing off the marble. When she died, the room was sealed. But decades later, during renovations, workers reopened it, and the air inside was still thick with the scent of melted wax. They say that on certain nights, particularly in November, when the Empress died, candlelight flickers from beneath the chapel door, though no candles are there. Visitors have heard faint weeping, as if from a woman praying behind the wall. The floor, too, has grown warm at times, though no heat source lies beneath. One historian wrote, "It feels as though she still prays here, not for him, but for herself." Schönbrunn has always been a palace of music. Mozart himself performed here as a child, charming the Empress with his tiny violin. His ghost is said to visit other corners of Vienna, but in Schönbrunn, music of another kind is heard. Guards patrolling the mirror room after midnight have reported hearing a harpsichord playing softly. The melody is delicate, mournful, not one recorded in any archive. When they enter, the sound stops. Sometimes, however, the room feels strangely warm, as though someone has just been there. In 2018, a visitor captured a short video during a private night tour. It showed the chandelier lights flickering in rhythm to faint, ghostly music. Audio experts later confirmed the sound of an 18th century keyboard. Impossible, since the instruments on display are sealed behind glass. Some say it is the Empress, replaying the lullabies she once sang to her lost children. Others believe it is her husband, answering from the other side. Among the palace's many legends, one appears across centuries, the White Lady, a tall woman in flowing white silk seen drifting down the grand gallery. She appears only before moments of royal sorrow. In 1889, she was reportedly seen days before the tragic death of Crown Prince Rudolph at Meierling. In 1914, servants claimed to see her again before the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the event that sparked World War I. Eyewitnesses describe her face as calm but unreadable, her skin pale as marble. Her presence brings silence. Birds stop singing, clocks falter. She walks with her hands clasped, her head bowed, and then fades into the mirrored walls. Though many call her a harbinger of death, some believe she is Maria Theresa herself, mourning the unending collapse of her bloodline.
Schönbrunn does not belong only to her. Her husband, Francis I, who died within its walls, has also been seen. His death was sudden, a heart attack during a carriage ride back to the palace. Servants carried his body through the courtyard, and the Empress collapsed beside him, crying, "Do not leave me." Now his shadow appears in the courtyard where he fell.
Visitors sometimes see the outline of a man near the fountain, leaning on the marble edge, head bowed. Photographs have captured an indistinct figure that fades before the camera can focus. In 1987, a night guard claimed that as he locked the courtyard gate, a voice behind him whispered, "Maria." He turned, but only the wind stirred the fountain's surface. When he looked again, he saw ripples forming the shape of two initials, FM, Francis and Maria. There is a door in Schönbrun's west wing that servants refuse to touch. It leads to a narrow staircase descending into the earth, a passageway built for emergencies during wartime. It has been locked for decades, but sometimes the sound of footsteps rises from below. The guards hear the creak of wood, the rattle of keys, the faint whisper of silk skirts brushing the stone walls. Once, a technician inspecting the corridor found old candle wax dripped across the first 3 steps. He said, "It's as if someone was walking down there and never came back up." The door remains locked, but each year a single key goes missing from the palace registry. They say it's the Empress's doing, reclaiming what was hers. Outside, Schönbrun's gardens stretch across 400 acres, a labyrinth of hedges, fountains, and statues. But even in the open air, the hauntings continue. Late-night visitors to the Gloriette, the great triumphal arch overlooking the city, have reported figures walking the terraces in silence. They appear in 18th century dress, glowing faintly in the moonlight. One couple in 2002 claimed to see a woman standing at the balustrade, her gown fluttering though there was no wind. They said, "She turned and smiled as if she knew us." When they later looked at photographs from that night, a translucent figure stood behind them, her hand resting on the stone. There is one hallway in Schönbrunn, known among the staff as the Emperor's Hallway, not for Francis, but for Napoleon Bonaparte, who briefly occupied the palace in 1805 and again in 1809. His spirit too seems reluctant to leave. Guards have seen a man in a grey coat walking swiftly through the corridor at dawn, his boots clicking sharply against the marble. The sound stops near the door of the room he once used as his quarters. In that room, mirrors fog inexplicably, and the scent of tobacco lingers, though smoking is forbidden. Some historians say Napoleon admired Maria Theresia's legacy. Others think he envied her power. Perhaps he returns not as a ghost, but as a rival, one emperor haunting another.
In the 1920s, a caretaker named Greta claimed she spoke to the Empress. She had fallen asleep in a small antechamber while cleaning and awoke to see a woman in black standing by the window. "You should not sleep where I once prayed," the woman said softly. Her voice was neither harsh nor kind, simply commanding. Greta tried to rise but could not move. The figure walked toward her, and for a moment the candlelight illuminated her face, the same face that hangs in Schönbrun's portraits. Then, with the sound of keys fading into distance, she was gone. When Greta reported the encounter, she was dismissed. But years later, she returned for a public tour. As she entered the Grand Gallery, the guide announced, "And here, Empress Maria Theresa once hosted her greatest balls." Greta fainted on the spot. Even today, visitors describe Schönbrunn as alive. Motion sensors activate in empty halls. Lights switch on during nights with no staff present. Security cameras capture faint flickers moving past the mirrors. One historian described the experience best. Schönbrunn is not haunted by one ghost, but by memory itself. Every wall remembers the weight of power. Every mirror reflects not faces, but centuries. And perhaps that's the true haunting. Not the footsteps, not the whispers, but the feeling that the Empress's will still shapes the palace she built. She is still there, walking through time, inspecting her halls, mourning her losses, ensuring her empire does not forget her name. As midnight approaches, the palace darkens. The fountains fall silent.
The trees stand still. Then, from within the mirror room, a single candle flares to life, unseen but reflected in the glass. A woman stands before it, her gown glimmering faintly. She reaches out, touches the flame, and whispers, "Francis." The light flickers and goes out. Moments later, the mirrors ripple again, and everything is still again. If you listen then, just before dawn, you might hear the sound of keys, a soft chime, a ruler still on her nightly rounds. Schönbrunn belongs to history, but history, it seems, still belongs to her.
In the heart of Spain, where the mountains of Madrid meet the cold breath of the plateau, stands a palace that is not merely royal, it is monastic, mournful, and magnificent. El Escorial, the royal monastery of San Lorenzo, rises from the landscape like a fortress built for both God and ghosts. Its gray granite walls stretch endlessly across the hills, cold even under the Castilian sun. By day, it feels eternal. By night, it feels alive. To step inside El Escorial after dark is to enter a cathedral of silence, where the air hums with prayers that never ended and footsteps echo from centuries gone. For this was the dream and the torment of King Philip II of Spain, the most powerful monarch of his age, a man obsessed with faith, death, and the afterlife, and who, it seems, never truly left. Philip II ruled a world empire, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, and lands across the oceans. His word commanded millions, yet his heart belonged to one place, El Escorial. He built it as both palace and monastery, a monument to his devotion and his guilt. For Philip's reign was marked by blood, the Inquisition, the conquest of the New World, and wars fought in the name of faith. The stones of El Escorial, they say, were meant to atone for his sins. But what kind of penance can cleanse an emperor's conscience? Philip spent his final years within the palace walls, bedridden, sickly, yet still giving orders from his chamber. As death drew near, he asked that his bed be turned toward the chapel so he could watch Mass even as he slipped away. The priests said he died peacefully. The servants said otherwise. They swore they saw him rise one last time, his body already cold, and whisper, "I must finish what I began." And some say he still is. El Escorial is unlike any palace in Europe. Its design is severe, geometric, symmetrical, and utterly without softness. Its long corridors stretch for hundreds of meters, each one lined with the echo of boots that have not walked in centuries. The monks who once served here described hearing voices in the cloisters after midnight, low murmurs in Latin prayers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The Pantheon of Kings, deep beneath the main altar, is where Spain's monarchs are entombed. Marble coffins, gilded and gleaming, stand in a perfect circle, a congregation of the dead. The air smells of stone and incense, and the silence is absolute. Yet guards say that sometimes, late at night, they hear a faint metallic sound, as if someone is dragging a chain across the bronze doors. Once a visiting scholar claimed he heard chanting, Requiem aeternam dona eis, the prayer for the dead, but the monks had all gone to sleep.
Philip II's private chamber still exists, small, austere, and windowed to the basilica, so he could watch Mass from his bed. The furniture remains as it was the day he died, but visitors speak of an unease there, a pressure in the air that feels like eyes watching from behind the crucifix. One evening, a caretaker heard coughing, dry, labored, human. He assumed a visitor had hidden inside. When he entered, the room was empty, yet the scent of burning wax filled the air, and on the pillow lay an indentation, as if someone had just been lying there. The caretaker never returned. It felt, he said, like the king was still dying, over and over again. Tour guides today warn of the chamber of the dying king, where the temperature drops sharply, a room frozen in the act of death.
During the years of the Inquisition, El Escorial was also a prison for condemned priests. Some were executed in secret, their bodies buried within the monastery walls. Centuries later, renovation workers discovered bricked-up alcoves containing human bones, the remnants of those who vanished in silence. Since then, many have seen robed figures moving through the corridors, black silhouettes with cowled faces, gliding without sound. They appear only in the oldest sections of the monastery, especially near the Hall of Battles, where murals depict Spain's triumphs. Witnesses say the monks seem to drift along the walls as if searching for something, or someone. One night, in 1968, a guard reported following a shadowy monk down a passageway, only to watch him vanish into the stone itself. He didn't turn a corner. He walked into the wall, the guard said. The Hall of Battles is one of El Escorial's greatest chambers, its walls covered in frescoes of Spain's victories. Kings and soldiers ride across them in endless conquest, their faces painted in glory. But when the lights are low, the soldiers seem to move. Their eyes glint like living men. Security guards have often heard clashing metal and muffled cries. One worker swore he saw a figure in armor step out of the fresco, cross the room, and dissolve into mist. Another claimed to find fresh footprints, boot prints in dust that no one else had touched. It is said that those paintings do not merely honor war, they contain it. The ghosts of soldiers, trapped in eternal battle, march forever along the walls.
Beneath the basilica lies the Royal Library, one of Europe's oldest. Thousands of manuscripts line its shelves, ancient texts on science, theology, and the occult. But among them lies a book that should never have been opened. In 1952, a visiting scholar studying an unnamed manuscript reported hearing voices whispering in Latin. He turned to a page illuminated with gold and red, a text on the afterlife, and suddenly felt a hand on his shoulder. When he turned, no one was there. The candles had gone out, and his breath turned to frost. He fled the library and never returned. Later, he learned that the same table where he'd been reading was once used by Philip II himself, the king who studied books of angels and demons alike. The monks who still maintain the library refused to speak of that manuscript. Some knowledge, one said quietly, is guarded by the dead. Each morning, the bells of El Escorial announce Mass. But some nights, when the city sleeps, they toll again, at midnight or at 3, when no hand should touch them. Locals who live near the monastery say the sound is mournful, low and echoing, as though it comes not from the tower above, but from below, deep within the mountain. In 1983, an earthquake shook the region lightly. The bells rang then, though no tremor had yet reached the building. Seismologists couldn't explain it. The monks said simply, "The king is walking again." The crypt, the pantheon of kings, is the heart of the haunting. Visitors who descend the narrow spiral staircase often feel dizzy, disoriented. The walls are black marble. The air grows colder with every step. At the lowest level lies the circular burial chamber where the monarchs rest. By candlelight, their sarcophagi gleam like wet stone. It is a place of peace, and yet not. On some nights, guards report seeing a faint light moving between the coffins, not the flicker of flame, but a steady, golden glow. It hovers near Philip's tomb, lingers, and fades. The monks say it is the king's spirit checking that all remains in order, still ruling his silent court of the dead. The most chilling of all tales came from a monk in 1911. He had been praying in the cloister when he heard someone sobbing,
a man's voice, deep and broken. He followed the sound to the basilica's altar, where a shadow knelt, head bowed. Thinking it was another monk, he approached. "Brother, what troubles you?" he asked. The figure looked up, and he saw the face of King Philip II, pale and ghostly, tears streaking down his cheeks. "My sins, they built this palace." Then the vision dissolved into smoke.
Some believe El Escorial was cursed from the beginning. The architect, Juan de Herrera, was said to dabble in sacred geometry and hermetic magic. The building's layout, based on a grid of perfect symmetry, was meant to mirror the heavens, a divine order in stone. But such perfection, legend warns, attracts the envy of spirits. It is whispered that Herrera, fearing his design had trapped something unholy, blessed every stone with holy water before the palace was complete. Still, strange accidents plagued the site. Workers crushed by falling beams, fires that burned only certain rooms, echoes that wouldn't stop. Even today, the symmetry of El Escorial unsettles those who walk its halls. It is too perfect, as if it hides an equation the living cannot yet understand. Every November, near the anniversary of Philip II's death, witnesses say the palace stirs more than usual. Candles light themselves. The scent of incense drifts through empty corridors, and from the direction of the basilica, a faint chanting rises, hundreds of voices reciting prayers in unison. At the same hour, the chamber where Philip died glows faintly, and a figure is seen walking toward the altar, a man in a black robe, tall, his step slow but certain. He kneels, clasps his hands, and whispers something too soft to hear. Then he fades, leaving behind only the echo of a closing prayer. Dios me perdone. May God forgive me. By dawn, El Escorial returns to peace. The corridors gleam once more, the basilica hums with tourists, and the ghosts retreat into their stone vaults. Yet the silence never fully leaves. The air still carries that ancient melancholy, the burden of faith turned into stone. For this is not a palace haunted by revenge, but by repentance. Philip II's soul still walks here, seeking absolution in a monastery of his own making. He built El Escorial as a stairway to heaven. Instead, he created a labyrinth where time and guilt are eternal. And if you stand in the crypt long enough, you might hear him, the Phantom King, whispering from behind the marble, "I am not forgiven." Perched high above the Vltava River, wrapped in fog and legend, stands Prague Castle, a vast labyrinth of courtyards, cathedrals, and chambers where the line between history and myth fades like smoke over candlelight. Beneath its Gothic spires, centuries of emperors, monks, and mystics have come and gone, but some, it seems, never truly left. This is the story of Prague's most haunting secret, a curse born not of blood, but of alchemy, ambition, and eternal longing for the divine. It is said that in the castle's shadowed halls, ghosts still guard the secrets of immortality. In the late 1500s, Emperor Rudolph II reigned from this palace. He was no ordinary ruler. Obsessed with the occult, the stars, and the art of transformation, he turned Prague Castle into a living laboratory of forbidden knowledge. Under his rule, scientists, magicians, and philosophers gathered from across Europe. Men like John Dee, the English sorcerer who claimed to speak with angels, and Edward Kelly, the alchemist who swore he could transmute base metals into gold. They wandered the castle's secret chambers, performing rituals under moonlight, chasing a single dream to unlock the elixir of life. But what they created instead was something else, something that never died. To the north of the castle lies a narrow passageway known as Zlata Ulichka, the Golden Lane. In Rudolph's time, it was home to his royal alchemists. Today,
It glows with pastel facades and tourist lights, but at night the street changes. Guards say that after midnight, the lamps flicker on their own, and faint voices echo through the walls, chanting, murmuring, sometimes crying out in agony. The smell of sulfur and metal fills the air. One guard swore he saw a door open by itself, revealing a man in a dark robe, his face hidden. The man carried a flask that glowed with inner light. "You must not see this," he said in perfect Czech, though the guard insisted the words came from inside his own head. Then the man vanished, and the flask's glow lingered in the doorway until dawn. Locals believe that the ghost alchemists of Golden Lane still work at night, forever trying to complete their master's impossible experiment. Rudolph's fascination with magic went beyond alchemy. In the heart of the castle, he commissioned a secret room, the Chamber of Mirrors, said to be lined entirely with polished obsidian. Here he invited seers to gaze into darkness and summon visions of the future. One night, Edward Kelly entered alone. He claimed afterward to have seen the faces of angels, but others heard him screaming. When guards forced open the door, Kelly was gone. The mirrors were shattered from within, and his voice echoed faintly, "The price is eternal." Centuries later, restorers uncovered a hidden chamber beneath the original floor. Inside were fragments of black glass, cold to the touch, yet vibrating softly. One fragment still lies locked in the castle archives. Those who've held it describe feeling a pulse, like a heartbeat beneath the surface.
The emperor himself has been seen many times. He appears most often in his study, where he once sat surrounded by star maps, crystals, and cages of rare animals. He died alone in 1612, half mad, his kingdom collapsing around him. Yet witnesses say that on certain nights, the door to his old chamber opens without sound, and the faint smell of burnt wax drifts into the corridor. Tour guides who've passed through after hours describe feeling watched. One claimed to hear the scratch of a quill, followed by a sigh. Another saw a faint shape at the window, a man in royal robes, his face half hidden by shadow. When the moonlight touched him, his eyes glowed with silver light. "He looked at me," the guide said, "like a man still waiting for his experiment to succeed." According to legend, one of Rudolph's alchemists succeeded, or thought he did. His name was Marek the Younger, a reclusive scholar who lived in a small stone workshop beneath the castle's foundations. He was said to have created a substance that glowed red and refused to cool, the philosopher's stone itself. When he presented it to the emperor, Rudolph touched it and cried out in pain. The stone burned, but left no mark. Marek vanished that same night. The guards found his chamber in ruins, the walls blackened, the air thick with the smell of ozone. For days afterward, the castle's lamps would not light. Some say Marek opened a door to something beyond life, and that the castle has never been the same since. Beneath the castle lies a series of tunnels known as the Old Dungeons. In Rudolph's time, they were used to imprison spies, traitors, and failed alchemists. Now they are sealed. But those who worked near the entrance report strange sounds, whispers, chains, and once a single piercing scream that lasted nearly a minute. When archaeologists explored the tunnels in the 1980s, they found scorch marks on the walls and fragments of glass melted into the stone. Instruments registered electrical fluctuations, as though something were alive down there. One photograph from that expedition showed a faint silhouette, tall, robed, and luminous, standing behind one of the researchers. The man who took it swore he was alone. After that, the Czech government closed the dungeons permanently.
In the heart of Prague, near the castle's shadow, stands the alchemist's door, a carved stone arch covered in mysterious symbols and Latin inscriptions. It was once part of Rudolph's magical workshop, said to open not to another room, but another realm. The door bears a riddle. He who knows how to die lives. No one knows who carved it, but those symbols, the sun, the moon, the serpent devouring its tail, are said to represent the unity of life and death. Late at night, people have reported seeing a pale light glowing from within its archway. Once, a group of students on a ghost tour swore they saw a man step out of that light, look at them, and vanish into thin air. His eyes, they said, were red as molten iron. Modern historians believe many of Rudolph's alchemists were actually early scientists, but the haunting remains. Infrared cameras placed in the Golden Lane have recorded sudden bursts of energy. Voices captured on tape whisper in Latin, ignis, vita, eternitas. Fire, life, eternity. A Czech physicist who spent a night inside the alchemical workshop reported that all his devices shut down at 3:15 a.m. He heard footsteps circling the room, then felt something cold touch his hand. When the lights came back, a thin layer of gold dust lay on the floor, unexplained by any chemical residue. He left the castle at dawn and never returned. During the Nazi occupation, Heinrich Himmler, himself obsessed with the occult, ordered his men to search the castle for alchemical artifacts. They found nothing but dust. Yet days later, one of his officers reportedly went mad, screaming that the walls were alive. His diary, later recovered, contained a final line written in Czech: "The alchemist still guards his secret." After the war, locals began calling Rudolph's ghost the Golden King. They say he appears whenever men try to misuse knowledge for power. His eyes glow like embers, and his voice whispers from the shadows, "You have not learned." Every few decades, on the night when the moon turns silver, an optical illusion caused by ice crystals in the air, the castle seems to awaken. Lights flicker in empty towers. The bells of St. Vitus Cathedral toll without cause. The river below glows faintly, reflecting colors no human artist could paint. People who live near the castle say they see figures walking the ramparts, robed men carrying lanterns that burn blue. They move slowly, deliberately, then vanish at dawn. Some claim that this is the night the alchemists return, still seeking the formula for eternity. But one legend warns that if anyone disturbs them, the curse will awaken again, the curse that binds the dead to their unfinished work.
There are those who believe one of Rudolph's alchemists truly achieved immortality. He is said to wander the castle grounds disguised as a tourist, his eyes gleaming with ancient wisdom. He never speaks, never photographs, never eats, yet he returns every year on the anniversary of the emperor's death. When questioned by a historian once, the man simply smiled and said, "The work continues." Then he disappeared into the fog. At dawn, Prague Castle looks innocent again. Its spires gleam in the sunlight, the tourists gather, and the ghosts fade into daylight's glare. But listen closely as you walk its corridors, and you might still hear the faint ring of glass, the soft hum of alchemical flame. The stones remember, the king who sought heaven, the men who courted damnation, and the secret that turned gold into dust. The alchemists are gone, but their curse remains. And perhaps, somewhere within those ancient walls, the experiment continues still, fueled by a single spark
that refuses to die. The desert has a way of keeping secrets. Beneath its dunes lie the memories of kings, buried in golden silence. The pharaohs of Egypt, rulers who believed they could command even death itself. Their tombs, carved into the Valley of the Kings, were not graves, but gateways to eternity. They filled them with treasures, spells, and promises to the gods. But eternity, as history has shown, does not come without a price. Tonight, we open the sealed doors of time and descend into the royal necropolis, where every shadow whispers a curse and every gust of desert wind carries a voice from beyond. For these tombs, magnificent and terrible, are haunted not by mere legend, but by the wrath of those who would never be forgotten. It started, as such tales always do, with wonder. In 1922, archaeologist Howard Carter uncovered the tomb of Tutankhamun, the boy king whose name had vanished from history. The air inside had not been breathed for more than 3,000 years. Gold gleamed in the torchlight, chariots, statues, amulets, and the young pharaoh's face immortalized in lapis and gold. But with discovery came death. Lord Carnarvon, Carter's patron, died within months, his dog howling in England at the exact hour of his death. His cause? A mosquito bite turned septic, though local priests whispered that the curse of the dead had been awakened. The lights of Cairo flickered out that same night, plunging the city into darkness. And so began the legend of the pharaoh's curse, a warning etched in invisible letters across the sands of Egypt.
While the myth spread, Carter himself wrote of something strange in his journal. Above the tomb's entrance, faint and half erased, was an inscription: "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king." Carter dismissed it as coincidence, a poetic invention. But the workers who entered the tomb with him refused to return after the first week. They claimed to hear footsteps echoing in the passageways long after everyone had left. One guard swore he saw a shadow walking toward the sarcophagus, carrying a torch that gave no light. Carter, skeptical but shaken, kept a notebook hidden, one that would not be found until decades later. In it, he wrote, "Something walks here still. I feel its eyes on me." The Valley of the Kings is silent but not dead. Visitors who have entered Tutankhamun's tomb speak of an air that feels alive, a subtle vibration that hums in the walls. Some say it's the sound of ancient machinery. Others believe it's the heartbeat of the pharaoh himself. Guards stationed overnight often hear faint music, low, rhythmic tones like a hymn sung under the earth. Sometimes the air turns cold and a gust of wind sweeps through the tunnel, though the passage is sealed. And then there are the lights, blue and gold orbs that float near the hieroglyphs before dissolving into dust. In 2015, a digital survey team captured thermal anomalies, heat signatures in the walls where no heat could exist. The images formed shapes like hands pressed against the stone from within. Egyptian priests believed every pharaoh's tomb was guarded by Ka spirits, divine doubles of the deceased king. Their duty was to protect the body and punish intruders. Modern researchers have dismissed the curse as bacteria, radiation, or coincidence, yet the stories persist. A photographer who worked in the tomb of Ramses VI in the 1960s claimed his camera melted when he tried to photograph the sarcophagus. He said,
I heard a hiss like breath against my ear. Tour guides whisper that if you listen carefully in certain tombs, you can hear the sand shifting as if someone unseen walks beside you. One even reported a handprint appearing on the limestone wall, too fresh, too human, and gone the next moment. In 1978, a French archaeologist conducting laser scans of Seti I's tomb described seeing a shadow moving ahead of him in the tunnel. At first, he thought it was a colleague, but the shape was too tall, too slender, and it carried a faint glow. When he called out, the shadow stopped, then turned its head. He ran. Later, he said, "I don't believe in ghosts, but whatever that was, it wanted me gone." His data from that night was corrupted. Every frame showed the same image, the silhouette of a man wearing a tall crown, arms crossed over his chest. Deep within the valley lies an uncompleted tomb, KV5, intended for the sons of Ramses II. It stretches farther than any other, a maze of corridors, unfinished and unexplored. When excavations resumed in the 1990s, archaeologists found thousands of fragments, statues, bones, inscriptions, but also strange marks on the floor, patterns of ash in the shape of circles. One worker vanished for several hours. When he was found, he was sitting against the wall whispering in Arabic, "They're not sleeping." After that, no one entered KV5 alone. At night, the Valley of the Kings transforms. The wind carries voices that seem to come from beneath the sand. Locals speak of seeing a procession of lights moving across the cliffs, torches carried by figures in ancient dress, walking in silence toward the valley floor. Tourists who have camped nearby tell of hearing chanting, deep, resonant, rhythmic. One man recorded it. When analyzed, the audio revealed frequencies matching ancient Egyptian musical scales. Perhaps it is the sound of memory, or perhaps the dead are still performing their eternal rituals beneath the desert moon. Even outside Egypt, the curse followed those who took from it. Artifacts smuggled from royal tombs often carried strange fates for their owners. A London collector who purchased an amulet said to come from the tomb of Queen Hatshepsut died after a series of hallucinations, claiming a woman of fire appeared in his room each night. His servants swore they heard a voice chanting behind the locked door. Another relic, a golden scarab, was traced from Cairo to Paris, New York, and eventually back to the Egyptian Museum. Each owner died within a year of possessing the artifact. The artifact now sits in a sealed case labeled "Do Not Exhibit." Not all ghosts are confined to tombs. In 1997, during restoration of Ramses II's mummy, workers noticed something strange. The air in the laboratory grew unbearably cold, and the lights flickered. One assistant fainted. When he awoke, he claimed he had seen the pharaoh standing upright, eyes open, his lips moving. "He spoke," the man said, "but I couldn't understand the words." The scientists laughed it off. Yet the cameras that recorded the event malfunctioned, all except one, which caught a brief image of the mummy's arm lifting slightly. The footage was classified and never released. Egyptian workers in the valley still recite prayers before entering any tomb. They place offerings of bread and water near the doors, asking the pharaoh's permission. One guide, Mahmoud, told this story. "We were inside Tutankhamun's tomb, closing for the night. My friend joked that he would take a piece of gold paint from the wall as a souvenir. He reached out, and the air grew heavy. We both heard a voice, low but clear, say, "Leave it." He dropped his hand and ran. Later that night, he woke screaming. He said the boy king stood at the foot of his bed. Mahmud has never returned to the valley. Scientists have speculated that tomb curses are nothing more than natural toxins, spores, mold, or arsenic gas sealed for centuries. But those who have been inside disagree. The feeling, they say, is not of poison, but of presence. The air is electric. The walls seem to pulse, and every breath feels borrowed. In 2019, a new team opened a previously sealed chamber beneath the tomb of Amenhotep III. When they broke through the final barrier, their instruments registered a sound, a low, resonant hum lasting 23 seconds. It was recorded, analyzed, and found to contain patterns consistent with human speech. The sound reversed, revealed a single phrase, "I am still king." The curse did not die with time. When the treasures of Tutankhamun toured the world, strange accidents followed. In Chicago, a curator fell from a ladder while installing the exhibit. In London, a visitor collapsed before the sarcophagus display, claiming to feel hands pushing him. In Tokyo, electrical systems failed the night before the opening. Every light in the gallery went out for exactly 13 minutes. Egyptian officials now bless every artifact before it travels, invoking the protection of Anubis, the god of the dead. Yet they say the pharaoh's spirits travel with their relics, watching. If you stand in the Valley of the Kings at dawn, you can feel it, the slow exhale of the desert. The sun rises over the cliffs, illuminating the tombs carved into stone like veins of gold. Birds cry, and the silence of millennia stirs. It's beautiful, yes, but there's something else beneath it, something unseen. The feeling that you are being watched not by history, but by eyes that never closed. The pharaohs built these tombs to last forever. Perhaps they succeeded. For the sands may bury their names, the winds may erode their monuments, but the kings of Egypt still rule, not from the throne, but from the shadows of eternity. The palace sleeps beneath a silver moon. Its countless mirrors reflect the cold shimmer of the night, and somewhere beyond the gilded windows a faint sob echoes, the kind of cry that carries both beauty and despair. They say it comes from the Duchess de Berry, a woman born to rule, destined to suffer, and condemned to walk the haunted halls of Versailles long after her heart stopped beating. For even in a place filled with ghosts, kings without crowns, queens without heads, and courtiers without names, hers is among the most sorrowful. She is the spirit of longing, of love lost and never reclaimed, trapped forever within the glittering cage that betrayed her. Marie Caroline Ferdinanda Louise, Duchess de Berry, was no ordinary noblewoman. She was born into royalty, married into France's most powerful family, and yet her life was a tragedy written in lace and blood. As the daughter-in-law of King Charles VIII, she entered Versailles in the early 1800s as a symbol of renewal for the Bourbon dynasty. Her youth and beauty enchanted the court. Her laughter filled the grand salons. For a time, Versailles lived again. But the French people had not forgotten revolution. The ghosts of the guillotine still haunted the kingdom. When rebellion rose once more, her husband, the Duc de Berry, was assassinated on a cold February night in 1820, stabbed outside the Paris Opera House as he left her side. She was pregnant, and from that night forward,
the Duchess was never the same. They say grief changes the air around a person, and in the Duchess's case, it changed Versailles itself. She shut herself in her chambers, refusing to speak or eat. The servants whispered that she still felt her husband's presence, that she often woke in the night and called his name. "Charles," she would whisper into the dark, "I am still here." Weeks turned to months, and slowly something shifted in the palace. The mirrors fogged, candles went out for no reason. Footsteps echoed through the Queen's apartments when they should have been empty. Even the royal dogs whimpered outside her door, refusing to enter. And one morning, the maids found her, kneeling before the mirror, her white nightgown soaked with tears. "He came to me," she said. "He was here. He told me he is waiting." That day, they began calling her La Veuve Blanche, the White Widow. The Duchess's apartments still exist in Versailles, though few visit them. Tour guides avoid that wing of the palace at night. Inside, the wallpaper has faded, the curtains hang heavy with dust, and the silence feels unnatural. Visitors who have entered after hours tell of a chill that seeps into the bones. They hear the sound of fabric brushing the floor, a faint sigh near their ears, and the scent of lilies, her favorite flower. One restorer, working alone in 1976, claimed he heard a woman weeping softly. When he turned, a figure in white stood near the fireplace, her head bowed. He thought she was a visitor, he said later. But when he blinked, she was gone. The only thing left was the scent of perfume and a single pearl lying on the floor. The guards now call it La Chambre des Larmes, the Room of Tears. In the years following her husband's death, the Duchess wrote dozens of letters addressed to him, letters filled with longing, despair, and fragments of a mind unraveling. One read simply, "If you walk in heaven, then open the gate, for I cannot live where you are not." None of those letters were sent, of course. They were sealed in a small chest, discovered decades later hidden inside the wall of her bedroom. When the box was opened, a gust of cold air filled the room, extinguishing every light. The archivist who handled them said the ink was still wet, though the paper had yellowed with time. Those letters now rest in the National Archives, but visitors say the scent of lilies clings to the pages, as though the Duchess herself still leans over them.
There is one mirror in her room that behaves differently. It was a wedding gift, carved silver, its surface flawless, even after centuries. Yet it does not always show what is before it. At night, the reflection sometimes lags, a fraction of a second behind reality, and on rare occasions it shows something else entirely. A ballroom filled with candlelight, dancers twirling in 19th century gowns, a woman in white standing at the edge, watching but never joining. In 2003, a team filming a documentary caught something strange on camera. As they panned across the mirror, a pale figure appeared for less than a second, a woman's face, tear-streaked and serene, hovering behind the cameraman. When they reviewed the footage later, no one could explain it. To this day, staff cover that mirror after closing time. Connecting her chamber to the chapel is a long hallway known as the Blue Corridor. Few walk it at night. The Duchess's ghost is said to travel that path, visiting the chapel to pray for her lost husband.
Guards who patrol after midnight report the sound of heels clicking softly on marble, though the corridor is empty. Sometimes a soft voice murmurs a prayer, Latin words no one recognizes, and then, for a brief moment, the lights dim and a shadow glides past the wall, a woman in white holding something in her hands. Some say it's a candle, others say it's a heart. In the gallery outside her quarters hangs a portrait of the Duchess painted shortly before her death. She is smiling faintly, her gaze soft, her eyes distant. But when the moonlight hits the canvas, her expression seems to change. Guards have reported seeing her mouth move, her eyes glisten as though with tears. One claimed the painting whispered to him, not words, but a sigh, long and mournful. Another refused to pass the gallery alone after hearing a woman's voice say, "It's too late now." Experts examined the painting for hidden layers of paint or moisture damage, but found nothing. Still, the portrait's eyes follow you, warm by day, sorrowful by night. During late-night tours, visitors walking through Versailles' Hall of Mirrors sometimes hear the sound of distant sobbing. It echoes through the glass, soft and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. When traced, it leads always to the same place, the door of the Duchess's former rooms. Once, a musician rehearsing for a performance inside the Hall of Mirrors stopped mid-song. He said, "Someone's singing." A woman's voice, high and sweet, but so sad. The audio recording from that rehearsal still exists. On it, faint beneath the violin, is a voice humming a lullaby known to have been composed by the Duchess herself. It was the same melody she sang to her unborn child.
On the anniversary of her husband's death, a strange light appears in Versailles. Staff and historians alike have seen it. A single candle burning in the Duchess's chamber, even though the room is locked and sealed. The flame burns blue, flickering gently before fading at dawn. Each year it returns. Each year it dies with the morning sun. Some believe it is her soul, reliving the night she first lost everything. Others think it is his, the Duke's, visiting once more to remind her that love, even cursed, endures beyond the grave. Among the older servants' tales is one that children in Versailles still whisper, that on the rarest of nights, when the palace is utterly still, the Duchess and her husband reunite. The great ballroom fills with ghostly light, and the two of them dance alone. No music is heard, no witnesses remain, but those who have seen the faint glow from outside swear the shadows move, two shapes twirling gracefully across the floor, hand in hand. The next morning, the palace smells faintly of lilies and candle wax. Before her death, the Duchess de Berry wrote one last letter. It was found on her bedside table, unsigned, addressed only to "my heart." The final line read, "Do not forget me, for I have never left." Those words, carved into the marble beneath her portrait, seem almost prophetic. For she has never truly left. She walks the corridors, her soft steps echoing like memories. She weeps in the mirrors, waiting for a dance that never ends. And when the palace falls silent, Versailles itself seems to mourn, the walls exhaling centuries of sorrow. Some say that anyone who mocks her name or disturbs her chamber invites her grief upon themselves. In 1984, a journalist writing an article titled "The False Ghosts of Versailles" spent a night inside the Duchess's room to disprove the myth. The next morning, he was found unconscious, muttering the same phrase over and over. "She was crying beside me." When he awoke, he refused to speak of what he had seen. He left France within the week. The palace guards say they still see him some nights. Not the man, but his outline, standing before her portrait, head bowed in apology.
Versailles holds many spirits, but none so sorrowful, so human as hers. She does not rage or terrify, she simply waits for the love that death could not take from her, for the man who promised he would return. And so, the White Widow walks the palace still. When you feel a chill pass through the Hall of Mirrors, or hear a soft sob echo behind the golden doors, remember, it is not the wind. It is a woman, once a duchess, now a ghost, still searching for her husband's hand in the endless ballroom of eternity. At first glance, Windsor Castle looks eternal, an emblem of British majesty, standing proud upon the Thames. Its grey stone towers have weathered conquest, rebellion, and centuries of royal drama. Within its walls, kings and queens have been born, crowned, and buried. Yet when the night settles over its battlements, the air thickens with something unspoken. For Windsor, perhaps more than any other palace in Britain, is alive with ghosts. Monarchs who ruled too long to rest, servants still bound to duty, and whispers of history that refuse to fade. It is said that to walk through Windsor after midnight is to walk through time itself, to meet the royal court that never died. For nearly 1,000 years, Windsor Castle has stood as the beating heart of monarchy. Built by William the Conqueror in the 11th century, it was meant to be a fortress of dominance, yet over centuries it became a home. But homes remember everything: joy, sorrow, and every secret whispered behind closed doors. By day, the castle gleams with order, soldiers in scarlet uniforms, the flutter of flags, the chime of bells from St. George's Chapel. But when the last tourist leaves and the lights dim, the corridors change. Footsteps echo where none should tread. The portraits seem to breathe, and in the silence you may hear voices, soft, regal, commanding, as though the long-dead monarchs still hold court in the afterlife. Among Windsor's oldest tales is that of the Grey Lady, said to haunt the Dean's Cloister. Her name, lost to time, is whispered to have been Eleanor de Montfort, a noblewoman imprisoned and executed centuries ago. Her spirit, however, never left. Witnesses describe her as tall and sorrowful, her gown gray as morning mist. She appears only on nights when the castle bells toll thrice, the hour of death in medieval superstition. Guards who have seen her say she drifts silently through the archways, her eyes downcast, her hands folded as if in prayer. One yeoman warder once said, "She looked as if she pitied me, as though she knew how my story would end." When dawn breaks, she vanishes with the mist, leaving behind the scent of old stone and rain.
The most famous ghost of Windsor Castle needs no introduction. Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, whose rule defined an age and whose will still commands the respect of the dead. She has been seen countless times since her death in 1603, most often near the Royal Library and the Long Walk, her presence marked by the faint sound of silk skirts brushing against the floor. Those who encounter her describe a feeling of cold majesty, not terror, but awe. During the reign of King George VI, a young guard reportedly fainted after seeing her figure glide past the staircase. When he awoke, he described a tall woman in white, her face pale but stern. She looked through me, as if I were a servant who had interrupted her thoughts. Staff members still say they can hear her voice in the upper corridors, reciting prayers from her own funeral service. "I have done what I could," she whispers. "Let men judge the rest."
Few monarchs left a deeper imprint on Windsor than King George III, beloved, brilliant, and broken. His long struggle with madness is one of history's great tragedies, and some say his mind never truly left the castle walls. During his illness, he was kept confined in Windsor for safety. Servants reported that he would wander the gardens at night, speaking to unseen companions, laughing and crying by turns. After his death in 1820, the laughter continued. Guards on duty near the king's apartments have heard a man talking softly, his tone calm, almost kind. Then, suddenly, a scream, wild, despairing, echoing down the corridor. When they investigate, the air smells faintly of lavender, the scent used to soothe the king during his illness. One night in 1994, a security officer swore he saw a figure seated by the window of the old library, gazing toward the gardens. The man's clothes were unmistakably Georgian, his eyes distant, his lips moving in conversation with someone unseen. The officer said he was talking to the moon. He smiled and said, "It's good to see you again." In the shadowed crypts of St. George's Chapel lie the tombs of many royals, Henry VIII, Charles I, and others. But among them, two small spirits are said to play in the aisles at night. They are believed to be Prince Octavius and Prince Alfred, the youngest sons of King George III, both of whom died in childhood. Visitors have heard the sound of giggles and small footsteps running down the chapel nave. One cleaner reported seeing the shadow of a child dart behind the choir stalls, only for it to vanish when she followed it. A priest once left a toy soldier in a pew as a silent offering. The next morning, it had been moved to the altar rail.
The long walk, stretching from the castle to the great park, is beautiful by day and terrifying by night. Riders passing by have reported hearing horses trotting beside them, though no riders are visible. The clatter of hooves grows louder, then fades into the trees. Locals claim it is the ghost of King Henry VIII returning from the hunt, his temper as fierce in death as it was in life. In one account from 1906, a caretaker heard the sound of heavy boots climbing the staircase near King Henry's gateway. When he called out, the steps stopped, then resumed behind him. He turned to see a massive figure in Tudor armor, bearded, broad-shouldered, glaring. The apparition lifted its hand as though to strike, and vanished in a gust of wind that slammed every nearby door shut. Even now, the staff say that when tempers flare within the royal household, the king's presence returns, drawn by conflict, feeding on it. In the 1980s, a guard stationed near the private chapel was found trembling, his uniform damp with sweat. He refused to speak for hours, finally whispering, "They were praying." He described seeing a congregation of people, dressed in centuries-old attire, kneeling in the chapel, their faces pale, their hands clasped. At their center stood a tall man in a red cloak, his head bowed. When he blinked, they were gone, but the candles on the altar were still flickering. The guard resigned that week. Even animals, it seems, sense what humans cannot. Palace staff have noted that dogs often refuse to enter certain corridors. The royal corgis, known for their courage and loyalty, sometimes bark at empty air near the Queen's gallery, tails lowered. One handler recalled a moment when all three dogs froze and stared down the corridor, ears pricked. She said, "They started whining. Then I heard it too, a woman humming, a lullaby. The sound was coming from nowhere." Afterward, the corgis refused to go near that corridor again. Every haunting has its sign, and at Windsor it is scent. The faint aroma of roses often heralds an apparition.
Guards who've encountered the ghost of Queen Elizabeth I report the fragrance moments before she appears. Others have smelled pipe tobacco in sealed chambers, believed to be the mark of King Edward VII. In the crypt where Charles I lies buried, the air fills with myrrh and blood, an echo of his execution. One historian described Windsor as a palace of perfumes and grief, each ghost announcing itself with its favorite scent, as if time itself could be remembered through fragrance. In recent years, there have been quiet murmurs among the castle staff of a gentler presence, one that comforts rather than frightens. After the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, guards patrolling the private apartments have reported a faint glow from her study. The lights flicker softly, though the power is cut each night. On one occasion, a guard swore he saw her silhouette standing at the window, looking toward the gardens she loved. When he approached, the room was empty, but the faint scent of her perfume lingered. "Her Majesty," he said quietly, "still keeps watch." Perhaps the most chilling legend of Windsor is also its most beautiful. On rare nights, just before dawn, a choir is heard singing from within St. George's Chapel. The voices are pure, ethereal, and perfectly in tune. Yet when the doors are opened, no one is there. In 1935, a royal chaplain who heard the singing identified the piece, Non Nodis Domine, a hymn once performed during Henry VIII's reign. The same hymn was sung at his funeral. Some believe it is the king's own choir, performing still, forever serving their monarch in the afterlife. It is said that Windsor Castle is never truly empty. Every monarch who has ruled there leaves behind a fragment of themselves. Sometimes it is a sound, the rustle of a gown, the echo of laughter. Sometimes a scent, roses, tobacco, lavender. And sometimes it is the cold brush of air that feels like a hand upon your shoulder, regal, gentle, eternal. For Windsor's court does not sleep, it merely changes shape. When the night is darkest and the moonlight spills through the chapel windows, the ghosts gather. Elizabeth walks the corridor, her head high. George III whispers to the moon. Henry VIII strides across the courtyard, his boots ringing like thunder. And the children's laughter, faint and sweet, fills the chapel like bells. They are the restless court of Windsor, the monarchs who refuse to leave, the rulers who remain guardians of the crown, bound not by duty, but by memory. And when dawn comes, the walls sigh with relief as they fade once more into history's silence. But make no mistake, they will rise again tonight. For Windsor Castle has never known peace, only the endless reign of its ghosts.
There are palaces that gleam with splendor, cathedrals of marble, gold, and velvet, and there are those that whisper. They speak not through words, but through the sigh of wind under old doors, the flicker of unseen movement in candlelight, the chill that rises where no window stands open. Across the world, royal halls are haunted not merely by ghosts, but by memory. The footsteps that echo in these places are reminders of what power costs, the price of ambition, love, betrayal, and blood. Some call it superstition, others divine punishment. But in truth, the dead linger not out of vengeance, but because history itself refuses to die. Think of them all. Catherine Howard screaming through the halls of Hampton Court, Marie Antoinette wandering the gardens of Versailles, the Emperor of China weeping in the Forbidden City, the kings of Spain kneeling in repentance beneath the marble of El Escorial, and the pharaohs of Egypt watching from beneath the sand. They ruled in different eras, spoke different tongues, and wore crowns of gold or jade, yet their fates are the same.
They built monuments to eternity, and those monuments became their prisons. Every palace is a mirror, and the reflection it casts is truth, that no throne stands without shadow. The ghosts that wander these corridors are not accidents, they are echoes, the sound of power remembering itself. Power is a promise no mortal can keep. For every victory carved in stone, a secret lies buried beneath it. The haunted palaces of history are proof that the human heart cannot bear too much greatness without breaking. Henry VIII built empires, but lost his soul with every execution. Maria Theresa ruled an empire of light, but died in mourning black. King Philip II raised El Escorial to praise God, yet filled it with the sound of his own regret. When they died, their crowns did not fall. They simply became invisible, pressing forever upon their spirits. The crown, after all, does not end with death. It is memory's heaviest burden. Perhaps that is why they remain, to reign forever, even in ruin.
If one were to walk through these palaces, truly listen, one would find more than stories. One would find stains. In Hollywood, the floorboards still bear the ghostly mark of David Rizzio's blood. In the Tower of London, Lady Jane Grey's final steps are heard before dawn. In Mysore, the scent of sandalwood and tears rises from marble corridors. These are not coincidences. They are memories the world itself refuses to forget. The earth keeps its own records, and sometimes it writes them in sorrow. Every haunting, every whispered voice, every flickering candle in an empty hall is a page from that hidden archive, a testimony to the truth that power, when misused, never sleeps. Not all who remain are cursed. Some linger out of love. In Versailles, the Duchess de Berry waits eternally for the husband she lost. In Windsor, the young princes play in the chapel's shadows, innocent and unafraid. Even in the pharaoh's tombs, the spirits who guard their kings do so with devotion, not wrath. There is tenderness in these hauntings, a reminder that the human heart is stronger than stone, stronger even than time. If love can make us live, it can also keep us from leaving. Perhaps that is why some ghosts do not frighten. They console. They remind the living that love once sworn is forever, even when the body turns to dust. It is said that to build a palace is to defy mortality. Kings and queens believed their names would last as long as their walls. Yet the irony of eternity is cruel, for it is not their glory that survives, but their sorrow. When the tourists leave, when the lights go out, when the last echo of footsteps fades, the palaces awaken, not as museums, but as living hearts of memory. The stones breathe. The halls listen. The air thickens with the weight of all who came before. The ghosts are not trespassers. We are. They built these worlds, and though their bodies failed them, their presence endures because we refuse to forget them. Theirs is not immortality. It is memory made flesh. We tell ourselves ghosts are the dead, trapped among the living. But perhaps it is the other way around. Perhaps we, the living, are trapped in their stories, wandering the remnants of their dreams, breathing air that remembers their pain. We see what we choose to see. When a door creaks, we call it the wind. When a candle flickers, we say it is the draft. But deep down, we know better. The past is not gone. It walks beside us, just beyond sight. The haunted palaces are not merely haunted by spirits, but by our own fascination with them, by our need to touch eternity, to believe that something of us will remain after the crown falls, the throne cracks, the light fades. We haunt them as much as they haunt us. There is a kind of silence unique to royal halls. It is not emptiness, but reverence. The hush after tragedy, the quiet that follows too much grandeur. In El Escorial, the silence hums like prayer. In Schönbrunn, it carries the faint rhythm of a woman's keys. In Versailles, it trembles with weeping. In Windsor, it sings softly, like a lullaby for the restless dead. Each palace has its own tone, its own music of sorrow. Those who are sensitive can hear it. The harmony between stone and soul, between power and penance. And if you listen too long, you begin to understand the silence itself is alive. Every crown glitters under candlelight, but none escaped the cost of its shine. For every celebration, a betrayal. For every victory, a ghost. And for every royal born, a shadow destined to follow. The haunted palaces of the world are more than relics of the past. They are warnings carved in marble. They whisper, "Remember me and learn," because power is never innocent. And the more one tries to conquer time, the more time clings back like a jealous spirit.
Sometimes the living and the dead share the same space without knowing. A caretaker feels a hand brush his shoulder and turns to find no one there. A tourist smells a queen's perfume in a sealed room. A guard hears footsteps on the stairs, the same rhythm every night for decades. We call these coincidences, but what if they are not? What if the past is not gone, but layered, like pages of a book, each story written upon the other, bleeding through? What we call haunting may simply be history, breathing through its own walls, unwilling to be silenced. There is a reason so many royal hauntings involve mirrors. A mirror, after all, reflects not only the living, but everything that once stood before it. It holds light and memory. When a ghost appears in a mirror, it is not entering from another world. It is surfacing from time itself. Perhaps the mirrors in Hampton Court, Versailles, and Schönbrunn show us what we refuse to face, that power and vanity are illusions, and that reflection, literal and spiritual, is the truest ghost of all. Look long enough into a mirror in any palace, and you will see not yourself, but history staring back. Every night, when the clocks strike 3, when the halls are empty, when even the guards dare not breathe too loudly, the past returns. The queens walk again. The kings speak to the air. The children play where no one should. And though the sun will rise and the ghosts will fade, the truth remains, they never left. Every stone remembers, every shadow is a page, every gust of air is a sigh from another time. And as long as we remember their stories, as long as we speak their names, history itself will continue to walk beside us. Because memory, once born, cannot die. And the palaces of the world, these grand haunted monuments, are the proof.
Stand in a royal hall, anywhere,
in any age, and close your eyes. You will feel it. The hum beneath the silence, the pulse beneath the marble. You will hear faint voices speaking in languages long forgotten, the rustle of silk, the soft fall of tears. That is not imagination. That is eternity speaking, softly, patiently, endlessly. For the dead do not haunt us to frighten, they haunt us to remind, to teach us that glory fades, but the human heart endures, that love, guilt, ambition, and regret do not end at the grave. They live on, in stone and story alike. History cannot die, because we keep it alive. And so, every night, when the lights go out and the palaces exhale, the whispers begin again. Not ghosts, but memory, eternal and awake. There are corridors that end in silence, and then there is the last one. Every palace has it. A hallway dimmer than the rest, lined with portraits that seem to watch as you pass. A place where footsteps echo a heartbeat too long. It is the corridor between worlds, where history folds into eternity, and the living walk beside the dead. Tonight, we step into that final corridor, the place where all the stories meet. The haunted palaces of the world fall quiet now. The candles burn low. The wind stills. And all that remains is the whisper of those who ruled, loved, and wept, still waiting to be remembered. Imagine walking alone through a palace at midnight. The air is cold but still. The marble floor reflects the light of a single candle in your hand. You turn a corner, and suddenly, silence. The kind that hums as if the air itself is listening. You hear something faint, a sigh, a laugh, the soft drag of silk on stone. You turn, but no one is there. Yet somehow you are not alone. The walls hold too much memory for solitude. This is the corridor that connects centuries, where Catherine Howard's scream from Hampton Court mingles with the soft weeping of the Duchess de Berry, where the cries of the forbidden concubine from Beijing blend with the prayers of King Philip II in Spain. They do not compete, they harmonize. Together, they form the song of the haunted, a requiem of royalty.
The first to appear is Anne Boleyn. Her head is still upon her shoulders tonight, her eyes bright, her lips trembling between pride and pain. She passes silently, carrying her invisible crown. Behind her follows Henry VIII, heavy with guilt he will never confess, his boots echoing like thunder. He reaches for her, but she fades before his touch. Next drifts Marie Antoinette, her gown shimmering like frost. She looks not angry, but weary. Her lips move as though whispering a prayer, or perhaps an apology. In the flicker of light, you glimpse Empress Maria Theresa behind her, keys jingling faintly at her waist, ever the sovereign, even in death, still inspecting her halls. And then King Philip II of Spain, tall, gaunt, wrapped in darkness, crosses himself and murmurs his eternal prayer for forgiveness. Behind him, the spectral form of Rudolph II of Prague, clutching a vial of light, eyes aflame with knowledge he was never meant to possess. They move in solemn procession, kings, queens, servants, and shadows, each carrying the weight of their unfinished stories. From the far end of the corridor, two smaller figures appear. The princes in the tower, Edward and Richard, walk hand in hand, pale and silent. Their eyes are full of sorrow, but their smiles are faintly hopeful. They look up at the ghost of Tutankhamun, who follows behind them, his face golden,
his presence regal and sorrowful all at once. They are bound by youth stolen too soon, by crowns that were too heavy for their small heads. They pass by in stillness, and for a moment the air smells of lotus flowers and candle smoke. Then the sound fades, and the corridor grows cold again. From the shadows comes the crying concubine of the Forbidden City, her white gown floating above the floor. Her eyes are endless pools of grief. As she moves, the temperature drops, a chill of centuries. Behind her, the ghost of Alame Lama of Mysore rises, her sari billowing like river mist, her gaze fierce and unbroken. Two women, divided by continents, united by betrayal. Both wronged, both eternal. They meet in the middle of the corridor and pause, as if recognizing the same wound in each other. And for the briefest instant, the air trembles, a silent sisterhood of sorrow.
Then comes the Duchess to Berry. She does not weep now. Her face is calm, her eyes glistening like dew. She carries a single candle, its flame blue, and holds it close to her chest as though it were a living heart. Behind her, the faint sound of footsteps. Her husband, the Duke, unseen but near. She glances once toward the portraits on the walls, perhaps searching for his face, then continues down the corridor, leaving behind a trail of perfume and forgiveness. The air changes again, warm and royal. From behind you comes the steady stride of Queen Elizabeth I, her presence commanding even among ghosts. The hem of her gown brushes your foot, though you dare not move. Her voice, proud, distant, fills the space. "I have done what I could. Let others now do what they must." And then George III follows, his eyes gentle and lost. He turns to the Queen, bows slightly, and whispers, "It's quieter now, isn't it?" She nods, and together they fade into the air like breath on glass. The corridor widens now into a great hall, one that seems to exist outside of time. The air is heavy with incense and candlelight. Every wall bears a mirror, and in each reflection a different era shimmers. The Tower of London flickers in one. Versailles glows in another. The sands of Egypt shimmer in the next. Each palace reflected, each alive with its own ghosts. And as you stand there, they begin to speak. Not in words, but in echoes, 1,000 murmurs blending into one. Remember us. Forgive us. Do not let us vanish. You realize, then, that this is not a haunting. It is a gathering, a congregation of memory itself. In every reflection, you see not just them, but yourself. Your shadow walks beside theirs. Your breath fogs the glass where their hands once rested. And you understand the truth, that we are all part of the same story. The past is not behind us. It walks with us, watches us, teaches us, and sometimes haunts us. We build our own palaces of memory. We leave behind our own ghosts, regrets, promises, moments we cannot let go. The corridors of history and heart are built of the same stone. And maybe that is why we return to these haunted palaces, why we tell their stories again and again, not to be afraid, but to remember what it means to be human. At the far end of the corridor stands a single candle burning on a stone pedestal. Its flame flickers, but never goes out. You approach, and as you do,
you hear faint music, the echo of every palace's song woven into one. You see all of them now, Anne and Henry, Maria and Francis, the Duchess, the Emperor, the Pharaoh, the Queen. They stand together, their faces soft, their eyes filled with light. Not sorrow, not wrath, only remembrance. They nod once, as if acknowledging you, and then turn toward the flame. One by one, they vanish into it, their forms dissolving like mist in morning sun. Only their voices remain, faint, distant, eternal. Tell our stories. Keep the light. When the last echo fades, the corridor begins to change. The mirrors dull. The candle burns out. The silence returns, not empty, but complete. You turn to leave, but the door at the end of the hall is closing slowly on its own. Just before it shuts, you catch one final glimpse, your reflection in the last mirror. But it's not quite you. The eyes looking back are older, wiser, a little sad. Then the door closes, and the candlelight dies. The corridor is gone, but the memory remains, carved somewhere deeper than sight. Every palace, every kingdom, every ghostly tale leads here to this truth. The past never dies. It becomes us. The haunted halls of history are not places to fear, but to understand. For in their whispers, in their shadows, we find ourselves reflected. Our pride, our mistakes, our love, our longing. And if you listen closely, when the world falls silent, you may still hear it. The echo of footsteps in an unseen corridor, the soft sigh of silk, the faint voice saying, "Remember." Because history once born never ends. It walks beside us forever. It is the final corridor, and we are all walking through it.